Hello, old chum. If you stick around, you'll hear about the Batman. He's kind of a big deal. The Fantasmagorium is pleased to welcome you to Capes, Cowls, and Crusaders, a show about the Batman. All I have to say is Kevin Conroy, the legendary late, great Kevin Conroy, regarded by many as the best performer to don the proverbial cape and cowl, elevated by the equally legendary Bruce Timm, complimented by the woman behind the voices, Andrea Romano. The first theatrical release from the animated DC universe. Tonight, we take a look back at Batman, Mask of the Phantasm. Cat is here. My name is Scotty R37. My name is Scotty R37. Damn it, I almost made it all the way through without screwing it up. And today, Mask of the Phantasm. Oh, hey, Cat, what's going on? How was your day?
The day was okay. Just finished watching the film.
Ditto.
In the world of Batman news, there's a few different things. One,
Yes.
news broke today that the live-action Titans TV series is ending after its fourth season. Same goes for Doom Patrol, even though that's not Batman related, but I think they're both ending for the same reasons, because DC wants to go in another direction and focus their efforts on this new thing, as well as building the Reeves universe, rather than, continuing down that road. So that goes for that. Sorry for fans of that show.
Well, is that the shadow of James Gunn?
It might be, because both shows are popular, and the fact that both of them happen to be ending after each of them have their fourth seasons seemed a bit abrupt. Like it was made at the same time. It's like, really? Because obviously they're going to be focusing their efforts on the new 10-year plan, whatever that is, and the fact that they've allowed Reeves to do his thing separately, and the fact that there's supposed to be a few different spin-offs of the Reeves universe, and it seems that's where they want to focus their energy, especially since Warner Brothers is still in the habit of, or David Zaslav rather, is still in the habit of cost cutting. So it's like, yeah, we're not going to have all these things running. Like, don't throw your eggs in the basket you want them to be in. We're not diversifying it too much, kind of thing. So
Right.
Bye Titans and Doom Patrol.
Did you watch either of those?
I watched the first season of Doom Patrol. It was wildly creative and unique and bizarre. I was not a fan of how the main storyline with the villain wrapped up. I thought it was kind of lame, but I did like the individual stories in each episode. So I will finish watching the series eventually, even though it's been over a year since I've watched it. Titans, I've never got around to starting, because for a while it was just on the DC app and then on different, like the CW, and I didn't have that station anymore. But now that it's all on there, I'll just binge it sometime to check that out.
And I know Steve of the Phantasmagorium show proper. Hey, Steve, I'm assuming he's watching. He's a fan of Titans. He's been a fan of Titans since the beginning. So it would be awesome to be able to sort of have a retrospective when that comes to an end and see what he has to say.
Yes. Other bit of Batman news is the Penguin series starts filming next month for a 2024 release date. Not sure when in 2024, but it's coming. Also,
I heard that's going to be like a sequel series to The Batman.
Yes.
There were sort of rattlings that it was going to be a prequel, but then it was confirmed that it is going to be a sequel series following.
Yes, it was going to be.
Colin Farrell again?
Yeah, and they said it was going to be a prequel for a long time, and then they finally changed their minds and said sequel, which I think is a lot better. Because I've already seen, granted the tone was very different, but we've seen Robin Lord Taylor rise as the Penguin, and since in the Batman he's just a mid-level management guy, he's not really the Penguin yet, so it's like, I'm not really interested in seeing a prequel. I'd rather see a sequel anyway. And Colin Farrell is also an executive producer on the show.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's to look forward to. Third piece of Batman news is Reeves says that his Batman sequel script will continue to be Batman-centric and not villain-centric like the Burton Schumacher films.
Mm-hmm.
And that they're not approaching it by thinking, oh, who would be a cool villain to have in here just for the hell of it. They have a story in mind that they want to tell that's going to be related to the Batman character, kind of like what Nolan did with his trilogy, where they decided what arc do we want Bruce Wayne to go on, what's the natural conflict in that arc, and at that point the villain naturally presents itself. So that's poised to be, therefore, likely a better setup for a movie than we had in the 90s with the Burton Schumacher stuff.
Well, it'd still be interesting, and again, this is somewhat spoilers for the Batman, not for anyone else. For me, I still haven't seen it yet. So I don't know the tone of it yet. I have my own proclivities, which we'll discuss when we eventually do discuss the Batman. But I still think that it would be good. You enjoyed the Riddler and you enjoyed the Penguin in the Batman.
Yes, but I would prefer to see the Penguin after the Batman, now that he's kind of in charge. And I would, and once he starts adapting the more trademark aspects of his character, likewise, they tease that the Riddler's still going to be around, even though he's a very different. He's not different. He's still a narcissist. He's still obsessed with puzzles and riddles. It's just that he's not as cartoonish as Jim Carrey or Frank Gorshin, and doesn't have like the leotard or the standard question mark suit. He has a much more.
Let's see. Someone's got toys.
I've got a couple things here. I got here was the teaser poster I saw outside my theater a year ago on Halloween to the Batman.
Yeah.
And then the actual.
Can you put that a little closer to the? Okay. Yeah, closer to the cam if you can.
Here's,
nice.
yes. Basically, a suit designed to cover up all your DNA with cling wrap. Extreme cold weather mask. The glasses is like a nod to Jim Carrey's Riddler. I don't know why they put this little black question mark thing, because that's not how it looks on the costume.
Wow.
I think that's supposed to be a card. This is the more, like, he has the question mark kind of painted in white on his jacket.
Oh, okay.
We have the card to the Batman, but it was very creepy, very different, because the tone, like, people say the Dark Knight trilogy is dark, but it's not. It's just in the real world. Whereas Matt Reeves' film just feels tonally very dark. Like, imagine if the whole thing took place on the Arkham Island from Batman Begins, and that's kind of what the whole city of Gotham kind of feels like, Okay. But that's that story. And then the last bit of Batman news, for anybody who cares, is Oscars.
Yes.
It got 3 nominations. Visual effects, which it will lose to Avatar.
Yes.
Best sound, which I'm thinking is probably solely because of the scene where he fires up the Batmobile, which the sound was amazing in that bit. But I think it's going to lose that one to Top Gun Maverick. And then makeup and hairstyling, which is a 2-horse race between the Batman for Colin Farrell's transformation into the Penguin and the Whale for Brendan Fraser's transformation into that. And I think it's just going to come down to what wowed people more. But I'm pretty sure the Batman's got that one safe. I am surprised. I thought it deserved nominations for cinematography, adapted screenplay, production design, and best picture. Yes, there are other nominees in those categories that I would knock off to replace with the Batman. Particularly in the best picture category. So that's what it is. Maybe that's also because the film was released earlier in the year. I don't know, because the visual effects seems like they always nominate blockbusters, even though there's a lot of regular, smaller movies which use visual effects that you don't even notice, which arguably is really impressive if you don't notice it. So that seemed like a no-brainer. Oh, visual effects, what came out this year type of thing. Makeup, oh, what's coming out this, that kind of stuff. So I don't know, maybe it got mostly overlooked because it was released in March, and kind of like other arts films like The Northman got overlooked again. Then again, all of Eggers' films get overlooked. But that's that story, and that's the Batman news of the day.
Well, there is one more, though.
What's that?
Yeah, well, I thought it was a highly contentious one in terms of the quote from Steven Spielberg, Stefan Spielbergo.
Yeah. So, yes, he said, for those who don't know, that Steven Spielberg said that he thought The Dark Knight should have been nominated for Best Picture. It should have been the one to break that glass ceiling. However, back then there were only 5 nominees allowed, and the way the voting process works, if the majority of the movies that make the first place ballot still constitutes a minority of the voters, then they'll go to what made the majority of second or third place, and that, so on and so forth. So unless I actually see the voting results, I wouldn't know, did it seem like that? Because it got nominated in a bunch of other big categories and not Best Picture, Best Director, begging the question, were they just biased against it, or did it just, or maybe it was on some of the lists and was just further down? I don't really know. Granted, I think that was a better comic book movie to be nominated for Best Picture, but then again, you can't compare it against other movies because it depends on what comes out in that year for competition. Mm-hmm. Yes, I think it's better than Black Panther. Yeah, it's better than all the Marvel movies. The Dark Knight is amazing. But I do think the Batman would give it a run for its money. I don't think that movies that are popular should be nominated just for recognition points. Because the thing is, if it's a financial thing, because we know that Louis B. Mayer, one of the founders of the Oscars, did it for 2 reasons. One is to placate the delicate sensibilities of the artisans who would be upset for various reasons of their films not succeeding or not getting the movies they wanted, that kind of crap. Mm. The second reason is because they were trying to drum up publicity for movies that didn't perform very well by making it seem like a big occasion. And so, but one could argue that you don't need to nominate big blockbuster movies like Avatar, Top Gun Maverick, and Best Picture because they've made a boatload of money and they're continuing to make money. Whereas small artsy films like Tar, Women Talking, obviously very good movies, but movies that most people probably haven't even thought about or seen because they got such limited releases for business standpoints. But
yeah.
Again, that's because I imagine that back in 1927, when they started the Oscars, 28 or 29, that it would have been a lot easier for them to conspire on what they wanted to do because the voting body was so much smaller. Like they could probably feasibly all meet in the ballroom at a hotel and decide what they wanted the narrative to be that year. But that's not really feasible anymore when you have literally thousands of people in each of the guilds. Because the 17 guilds that comprise the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences only get to nominate films in their specific category and then Best Picture. So, for instance, there's like cinematographers can nominate for cinematography and Best Picture, but actors, because there's 4 acting categories, get to nominate for 5 for Best Picture, and then the 4 acting nominations, so on and so forth. Which is why I'm surprised that certain people who get nominated at, like, say, the SAG Awards don't get nominated at the Oscars. Like Danielle Deadwyler for Till is a leading actress nomination, but she didn't make the short list for Academy Awards, even though the same guild is nominating. Same with the DGAs 10 years ago, when they're like, how is it that Ben Affleck wins the Directors Guild Award for Best Director of the Year, and that same guild doesn't nominate him for Best Director at the Oscars? It's kind of weird. But as for whether or not a movie, so I don't think you should nominate a movie simply because it's popular with a lot of people, even though the storyline coming out of the pandemic is a great storyline that people are going back to see those kind of movies. But if you don't think they're genuinely the best, I don't think you should just give them a nomination just because. Kind of like when the the Guild of Women Film Journalists or whatever put out a statement complaining that women directors didn't get nominated, and the 5 movies they led with that they said should have had nominations for, I think 2 of them had a legitimate shot, but again, they were very limited release films, even though one of them did get in the Best Picture category. So, I mean, it's not like an act, because again, it's not really feasible for everybody to be conspiring on like thousands of people in a messenger chat or in a Zoom call saying, okay, who do we want to screw over this year? Like, that's what the Hollywood Foreign Press does. That's not what UMPUS does, which is why I didn't find that complaint that they made to be very valid. So as far as did it deserve Best Picture? Absolutely. Got nominated in well enough categories and was considered a very exceptionally good movie by everybody who saw it, that it was a surprise when certain tiny art films which got limited release, like The Reader, which based next to nobody saw, including Academy voters, gets in over The Dark Knight. Or even Revolutionary Road, I think, got a Best Picture nomination, which was bland as hell. And it's like, how does this happen? So I agree with Spielberg that it was good enough to deserve a nomination and probably should have gotten one. Was there a bias that voters had back then saying, oh, we'll nominate you for technical categories? And obviously they couldn't overlook Heath Ledger's performance because it was just too amazing. But I don't know. I mean, yes, I say you should nominate it, but if you think it's a good movie, don't nominate it just because it's popular or because it's, made a lot of money. I'm not a fan of that.
Now, when it comes to the Oscars, before we get to the comparison that I had, that I was drawing upon, and I hope it's relevant, but the year after The Dark Knight was when they expanded it to 10 films as opposed to 5.
Yes, and the president of the Academy was quoted as saying, I would be lying to, we had a big meeting about that after that award ceremony in 2009, and he said, I would be lying to you if the words The Dark Knight didn't come up multiple times in their discussion of whether they should expand the Best Picture pool.
And Christopher Nolan's name was probably bandied about that evening as well after the Oscars. And so I think, and again, because, and as a fan of Robert Meyer Burnett, I've heard this mantra many times, it's show business, not show friends. The whole idea, the Oscars is basically People magazine, so that you can see the celebrities that you want to see and promote the films that they want you to go and check out. Some of them are popular, some of them are not. There's going to be a boost either in a wider audience. You're going to make a champion even more of a champion, and you're going to get those smaller films more of an audience that they probably deserve. Although, I still haven't seen The Whale because I enjoy being in a good mood, and Darren Aronofsky always makes me feel like crap in a good way. Like, I know I'm going in and I'm going to feel bad coming out of the theater. But in terms of the promotion of the film, I think that it's a money-making situation. And when you do have movies like Top Gun Maverick, when you do have Black Panther, these are movies that are to draw in the famous faces that people want to see to watch the Oscars, while also drawing attention to movies that the general audiences have seen. Again, I'm a fan of Aronofsky. I just have to be in a really interesting headspace to want to go and see it. Whereas Top Gun Maverick, I saw twice, and I'm excited to see Jennifer Connelly and the guy who played Vision at the Oscars, Paul Bettany. Pardon me. How could I forget? But the part that I thought was relevant is considering Spielberg's history and beginnings as a blockbuster filmmaker, I thought it was interesting that he is now regarded as one of the old guard of Hollywood, as one of the, and just based on time, his star has never really fallen as a director, but he sort of elevates the perception of those blockbusters by giving credence to The Dark Knight, whereas someone like Martin Scorsese, who started off in art house films, dramas, he toyed with comedies, but I don't think we talk about Night Shift very much, and he says these aren't cinema, these shouldn't be recognized. And I just thought that that's an interesting conversation between the artistic merit of what is cinema. And when you have someone saying comic book movies are just roller coaster rides, you can point at something like The Dark Knight and say, no, it actually is a reasonable film to consider as being art.
Well, but also, what I thought was odd about his roller coaster comment is that you can make the same argument about a bunch of action movies, like 80s action movies and stuff like that. There's all sorts of different genres which are basically giving you the same thing. Like, again, the rom-com genre was just the same 3 or 4 plots recycled ad nauseum. Mm-hmm. And right, so it's just everything's kind of a roller coaster. A lot of things can fall into the roller coaster ride thing. Now, I admit that when he said it's not cinema, he was referring to the fact that every Marvel movie is set up to lead into the next thing. It's like an ongoing TV show.
Yes.
Whereas The Dark Knight was not set up for sequels. And so that would be a difference. But just because, because there were movies back in the 40s and the 30s which were only seen on big screens, but they were serials. But that's still screened in a cinema, so it's still cinema. So that's kind of bizarre when you get down to that. And then I remember seeing a video from early 1976 where Spielberg is at home watching the nominations be read out for the Oscars to see if he's going to get Best Director nomination for Jaws, and he didn't get it. And some other more members of the old guard elite got nominated when they probably shouldn't have gotten nominated over Spielberg, but he wasn't upset about it or anything. He's like, I got beat by whoever it was. He was kind of joking about it.
Yeah.
But he even thought back then, he was aware that these movies are more than that. And that doesn't mean that every blockbuster is going to be Dark Knight or Jaws quality, but it's still there. It's still there to be considered. So,
well, and it's a conversation that's really interesting just in terms of the nature of the Oscars. And I don't know, are we planning on doing anything for the Oscars this year?
I don't know. But another thing I just remembered is that Christopher Nolan said that he thought that Black Panther deserved its Best Picture nomination. He saw it and he thought it was good for what it was. And that was the one that broke the glass ceiling as far as for that category. Whereas Angela Bassett just broke the glass ceiling for Marvel acting roles because it's the first time any Marvel actor's been nominated, or not any Marvel actor, but any actor in a Marvel movie has been nominated for a Marvel movie specifically. And I think she's the front runner for that one. So
for Best Supporting Actress?
Yeah. She's been winning like all the other awards shows. So, probably.
Oh, okay. Well,
she was really good.
And I just, and again, the reason I ask if we're doing an Oscars thing is because I don't want to get too much into a rabbit hole of Oscar discussion in terms of what is considered film, what is considered art. And then there have been a lot of genres that have been dismissed in terms of the Academy, whether it be science fiction films, superhero movies.
Comedies. And another dynamic that comes into play today is just whether or not they've seen the movies. Because I think the fact that Netflix movies are getting a lot more nominations lately, while some of them are good, it has to do with the fact that, well, it's on Netflix. Everybody could see it. Like, for instance, Turning Red, yes, it's a Pixar movie, but it didn't get a theatrical release. It went straight to Disney Plus back in March. Well, it's on Disney Plus, so a bunch of them are able to see it. And Disney Plus has been advertising it a lot lately leading into nominations as something that they wanted to push. So that makes people more aware of it. And therefore, what do you know? It gets a nomination. Because given the Academy's track record for ignoring movies that come out in the first 6 months of the year, the fact that something that didn't get a theatrical release, which is kind of odd because I thought it would require a theatrical release to get a nomination, but because even the Netflix ones get limited release to qualify for Oscars. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they put Turning Red back out into theaters sometime later on to help to make it qualify. I just never heard about that because that's something I just kind of thought about, but I'd have to check. So so that's up for grabs, especially when I think it's Variety that does the anonymous Oscar ballot every year, and you see how people vote, and it's like, Jesus, this isn't good. So yeah, maybe we'll do something. Maybe I think 2 years ago we did a watch along, but I don't think we broadcast it. But
right. Well, we'll
follow along with text messages.
Yes, I remember raging out that year. So anyway, we are here for the Batman Mask of the Phantasm. Before we get to that, I do want to say hello to all of the fine people in the chat. Jill was here 39 minutes before the show. Thank you so much, Jill. Hey, Daniel's Hot Topics is here. Hey, Daniel. Oh, thank God. I did not miss this. I thought I did. Nope, not yet. We're still doing the thing. Lemon Pie. Hey, Lemon.
Hey.
And Daniel says, I wish I was here for the other ones as well. They are available on the playlist on the Phantasmagorium show channel. And I think, Kat, you may have to correct me, but I think I've been sober for most of the Batman ones.
Yes, you have been.
Surprisingly, considering the debacles that I put you through during Martini's Gadgets and Guns.
Well, the worst episode of Martini's Gadgets and Guns was our Casino Royale episode from September 15th, 2021.
Hells yes, it was.
Yeah, it was horrible. I'm tempted to just redo that one. But
hey, if you want to go back to it, I have absolutely no problem with that. Hey, Black Philip Alvarez is here. Hola, amigos. And Phil says, I've never seen this one before, so I can't say much. I know it's very well praised, though. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
In fact, Siskel and Ebert regretted skipping it in theaters. They saw it on home video. And they're like, wow, this is better than the Burton films.
Well, we will discuss. Phil says, I'm glad Reeves is taking his time and focusing on Batman more. Absolutely. Well, and again, I suppose I do have to say I can't agree with you wholeheartedly, Phil, just because I haven't seen it yet. I have my reasons, and you'll find out later. Daniel says, Batman Mask of the Phantasm was the first Batman animated movie I ever bought, I'm assuming. In those days, back in 1993, they did not have seasons to sell, not even DVDs or on VHS. The only thing you could hope for in those days was this movie to come out in VHS. Yeah, this was my first animated as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I didn't see this movie until probably first time late 2000, like 2009, 2010, somewhere around there, and I can't remember how I saw it.
And with Daniel, yeah, this was something that I bought blind. I just saw it. I had heard that it was in theaters. I knew it came. It came out on Christmas Day in 1993, but it was something that I hadn't seen, and I wanted to, and I bought it, and I was blown away. I really, really enjoyed it. Although the back of the VHS cover did spoil that the Joker was in it. So anyway, Phil says, and I guess I just did too. Phil says, I honestly don't know why I don't own Mask of the Phantasm yet or seen it. Hey, man, it's totally worth it. It's totally worth it. Captain Finity is here. Hey, Finity, I just saw Casablanca for the first time. Awesome, dude. Great movie. It is in a battle constantly for my favorite movie of all time. Diggs BTW7 says, hey, what's up, G? I'm assuming you're G. I don't know. Daniel says, I watched this movie when I bought it in 1993. And Jill came back and said, hello. Jill says, wow, when our opinions merge at Daniel's Hot Topics, you know it's magic. And that's this Batman movie. I love it. Super jazzed because I know Jill follows along with the shows. And so I'm glad that she enjoys the movies that she enjoys when she sort of has the homework to watch them. Phil says, it's after hours. He did not night shift. After hours, my mistake. Night shift is completely different. But I can see getting those mixed up in similar plots. Ron Howard did Night Shift. Yes. Phil says, I just want to see who gets slapped this year. Yeah, there we go.
I think the Oscars ratings will be up just because people want to see at least whoever's going to joke about that because it's inevitable something like that's going to come up during the show.
Yes, it will. And yes, I assume it will. I'm trying to wean that memory out of my memory. But Finity has a speculation that it'll be Alec Baldwin's lawyer. So that is on the over under for who's getting slapped at the Oscars this year. All right. So Batman Mask of the Phantasm, as I mentioned, released in 1993 on Christmas Day. and following the success of the first season of Batman the Animated Series, which was a primetime animated half-hour drama that premiered on Fox. And this was made in the hiatus between seasons 1 and 2, if I recall correctly. I know it was on a hiatus, and they weren't intending it was going to be either a direct-to-video or a movie of the week. And they said, "This is actually we can do this for a theater."
That explains why the animation kind of sucks for a theatrically released movie. Because usually, when you put a movie out in theaters, you have a bigger budget, and the difference between animation quality from the TV show version and the theatrical version is night and day in most cases. This was just, it looked like an episode of the TV show. Like, the animation didn't look any better. Like, there was no more money thrown into it, but that explains it, I guess.
Well, and I would disagree that the animation sucks. I think it looks really good. It was a revolutionary.
Well, I mean, it sucks for well, look at how pristine Disney 2D animation looked at that time versus this looks more like. I mean, I know it's an HD, but it looked a bit standard definition, and some of it just looked too much like the the animated series. Like they didn't boost the budget for the animation to push it further, which they could have done. But like you said, if it was going to be planned to be on TV or direct to video initially, then that would explain why, because they'd already animated the movie, it was finished, and it's like, oh, let's put it out in theaters.
Well, and I think that the main thing that they did to spruce it up, if you will, is the opening credits are done over a CGI Gotham City, and that is the standout of it. But that always sort of disappointed me, because Batman the Animated Series, when it first came out, one of the things that they did to set the tone for Gotham City and all of the backgrounds was that traditionally when you did the background set paintings, if you will, for lack of a better term, all the backgrounds, they were drawn on black paper as opposed to on white paper. So they would have to try harder, and it would like the colors are more absorbed into the background as opposed to popping and obfuscating the cell animation that was happening in the foreground. And I always loved the backgrounds on this. I find the character designs of the Joker, Batman, which are the mainstays that are in this movie. You do get a brief Commissioner Gordon, but he's not really involved in it. I'm so happy you get Harvey Bullock. I loved the character designs throughout the series. And so, yeah, were you a fan of the animated series itself? Have you watched much of it, if any?
I've only seen a couple episodes. I'll probably burn through more of it now that I have HBO Max. I can't remember again where I saw this film the first time, only that was a long time ago. But I was always aware of the Kevin Conroy Batman and very familiar with that and how iconic that is.
Absolutely. And Kevin Conroy spans not only Batman the Animated Series, but also he was live action in Crisis on Multiple Earths, or whatever the CW Flash crossover event was. He plays older, embittered Batman. He played Batman in the Arkham series of games as well. He shows up all over the place, and as we know, or if you don't, unfortunately, we lost him last year after a long affliction with cancer. And and also based on that situation as well, with Mark Hamill voicing the Joker. Again, many people regard him as one of the best actors to play the Joker. And he's essentially, I don't know if this is confirmed forever and ever, Mark Hamill, please at me. But from what I heard recently, that when he would get calls from Warner Brothers or the production saying, we're doing another Batman, do you want to play the Joker, or can you play the Joker? His first question is Kevin doing it? And now he doesn't see himself playing the Joker anymore, because he always felt that they were sort of a double act together. Which is, we lose Mark Hamill, but I'm disappointed, but I understand his reasons for making that decision. But the Joker doesn't show up until halfway through this movie, so we don't have to worry about Mark Hamill for a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm going to recap it in chronological order because that's simpler. At times when I was watching this movie, it wasn't clear that there were flashbacks, because Bruce and Andrea look the same age when they're younger, and it's only when certain things came up that I'm like, oh, this is a flashback. And then it would see it like the edit wasn't as clear about it. Like when they're dating and they go to the fair and you see what is clearly the prototype for the Batmobile. And she's like, oh, wouldn't that be so cool to get that? Somebody's like, yeah. So basically, they met at the cemetery, grieving his parents. They started dating, and he had this conflict of interest in a way where he's like, well, my parents probably would have wanted me to start a normal life and get married, that kind of thing, but I pledged to be, avenge them and fight crime. And at one point, he puts on he foils a robbery, but the criminals aren't afraid of him. They kind of mock him, and he's kind of bothered by that. And he's not sure what he's going to do. He eventually decides, well, I'm just going to donate a lot of my inheritance to the GCPD, and I'll just marry Andrea. And he is out exploring the grounds and comes upon the Batcave when she kind of shows up, and he proposes to her. She accepts, gets a ring. They're very happy. And a short time later, she sends him a letter, or gives Alfred a letter to send to him, where she breaks it off for mysterious reasons, and he's devastated. And that's when he decides that he's going to take on the mantle as Batman and really get into it. And it's not, and the excuse she gave for why she had to leave is that it had something to do with her father. 10 years later, Batman is pursuing this crime boss, Chucky Soul, in this great car chase. But this mysterious character, inspired by the Reaper character from Batman Year 2 comic, this character called Phantasm bears a resemblance to the Grim Reaper, the Ghost of Christmas Future, but with a scythe. He comes and he has like these, appears like a magician out of smoke or whatever, which they said was directly inspired by Mysterio from the Spider-Man series and comics and stuff like that. And so Phantasm causes Chucky Soul to crash his car into a building to get killed. But because Batman was in pursuit and a bunch of people see him, they immediately make the connection that, oh, Batman killed Chucky. And that prompts Arthur Reeves, who's running city council, who's kind of corrupt. He's on the mob's payroll. He's like, that's it. Batman has taken things too far. We got to arrest this guy and put a stop to it, type of thing. And Gordon's like, I'm going to have no part of it. Batman doesn't kill people. This is not what he does. This is not Batman, but go at it, have at it. Good luck. And they're like, okay, we don't need you, and that kind of thing. Then we find out that another gangster is and attacked at a cemetery, where he ends up getting killed once again by Phantasm. He falls into a grave, and then a big statue of like an angel or a demon or something is pushed down on top of him, and he dies. And then Batman shows up to chase him, that kind of thing, and it's like they're worried about it. He gets another one, and so it's like, who is this Phantasm? Why is he killing people? The mob is convinced that it's Batman, and Valeska, the elderly member of the mob, is panicked, and he decides to go to Arthur Reeves, and he's like, are you sure it's Batman? He's like, it's got to be Batman. The guy looks like Batman. Who else is it going to be? And he's like, well, I'm too old for this stuff. I can't deal. Which is sort of an odd thing to say. It's like, you're in the mob, and it's like, oh, I'm too old for killing and that kind of stuff. It's like, okay. He's like, I can't deal with this. I gotta get out of here. So he decides to go to the Joker out of desperation, I suppose. And so, kind of like a little nod to that later on in the Dark Knight, where they turn to the Joker. Mom turns to the Joker for help us with Batman, kind of thing. And so Valeska goes to Joker, and he's like, you gotta save this guy. It's Batman. And Joker's like, I'm not so sure if this is Batman. It's possible that he snapped. Not really sure. He's like, sure, I'll help you. So then we cut to Phantasm showing up at Valeska's mansion, and he's like, oh, I'm going to get you, type of thing. And he pulls away the newspaper that Valeska appears to be reading, and Valeska is dead from Joker venom, and in his lap is like a camera that he's holding, which actually doubles as a bomb. And Joker can see now through the camera that it's clearly not Batman. He's like, okay, wait.
You go first. You go first.
And he's like, ooh, another freaking town to fight. This is going to be fun. and
then he says, well, it seems like we're going to have to, your name is just about to be spread all over town, not to mention your legs and your feet and your spleen and your head. And then the Phantasm jumps out and the whole apartment blows up, or the whole mansion blows up. Awesome. It's so good.
Yes, it blows up to pieces, and Batman was in pursuit and nearly gets caught. And by this point, Andrea, who's sort of come back into his life, I kind of found it a bit convenient in the way that, Batman may not have been as careful when she discovers who he is at the cemetery and deduces that he's Batman, which is admittedly done for the sake of convenience. She shows up to save him when he's fleeing the explosion from the mansion. And they kind of have this, contentious relationship because she's the one who got away, type of thing. And he's trying to figure out, meanwhile, like what's going on. Arthur Reeves, meanwhile, who's really upset about this, all these mobsters are getting killed, this time he goes to Joker, and he's like, okay, it's Batman. It's got to be Batman. Why don't you? I need you to kill him for be done with it. You hate the guy. I'll pay you whatever you want. And he says, "Sorry, it's not Batman. I'm positive it's not him. I know that guy. He's too cute. This ain't him." And so Reeves just kind of gets on Joker's nerves, so he kind of attacks him with the Joker venom, but not enough to kill him. He instead is just hysterically insane, left in the hospital, and Batman goes to interrogate him. By this point, Batman's already found the photograph showing all of the victims with Andrea's father, Carl, the man who she said she had to leave Bruce for. And Batman notices in this photograph, this goon, one of Valeska's goons, he realizes it's the Joker, which I thought was a bit random to try and tie him into that and to, sort of putting an extra origin. Oh, he was a gangster before this type of thing. And so he deduces that from putting the pieces together that from his further investigations that her father was in charge of setting up dummy corporations for the mob. He embezzled some money from them for his own investment. The mob found out about it and panicked and demanded to get the money back. By the time he did, they decided we're going to charge interest in the form of killing you. He didn't want that, obviously. So he and Andrea fled to Europe. And for some reason, he decided to tell his lawyer this. And at the time, the lawyer was Arthur Reeves. And Reeves sold them out to the mob in exchange for financing for his first run for city council. Which, spoiler alert, it doesn't cost a ton of money to run for city council, especially not enough to need money from the mob to be able to do that. But okay.
Gotham.
Yes. So Batman believes that Carl must be the Phantasm, that he's coming back to kill these people so he can renew his life for himself and his daughter. But things take a surprising turn when Phantasm ends up tracking down Joker. And Joker by now has figured it out as well, because Joker knows that Carl is not Phantasm, because, spoiler alert, Joker killed Carl before he was Joker. He tracked him down and killed him. So Andrea had spent the 10 years between her father's murder and her return as Phantasm training and becoming combat oriented because she wanted to avenge her father's murder as well as avenge herself for missing out on a life with Bruce, because obviously the mob would have gone after her if they couldn't go after her dad. And so Batman has figured this out by now as well, because he's figured, because once he recognized the Joker was one of the goons, he's like, oh, Joker, this is what's going on. And he puts the pieces together. And they go to the same fairground where they had where he previously discovered the prototype for the Batmobile. And Joker and Andrea have this kind of showdown. She unmasks herself as Phantasm. And I thought it was neat that Phantasm's voice is the same as her father's voice, just slightly altered, both voiced by Stacy Keach. And
Chucky Saul, your angel of death awaits.
So Joker set explosives all over this place to blow. Batman shows up and stops her, and he pleads with her to turn away from this. Vengeance isn't going to solve anything, which is like they took everything Bruce they have to pay. And he's like, get out of here, I'll take care of it, as the bombs start going off. And she manages to escape with Joker. But Batman falsely thinks that Andrea and Joker were killed in the blast. And I can't remember if this movie is its own thing or if it's part of the continuity, because they don't really resolve whether or not she killed the Joker or if he just maybe escaped again or what. It's just like he's gone. And Bruce goes back to the Batcave. He's despondent. Alfred consoles him. He says, well, sir, there was no saving her. Revenge, it corrupts the soul and that kind of thing. But he sees that she left a locket behind for him, so he knows that she lived. And then we see her on a ship, like an ocean liner, sailing away from Gotham. And again, it's left ambiguous as to whether she killed the Joker. I would assume, if this is its own thing, that she did, but who knows? And that's kind of...
That's sort of the mystery of the Joker. Like, back in the 80s, when it was a death in the family, and the Joker, murdered the hell out of Jason Todd with a crowbar and then blew up the warehouse that he was inside. At the end of that comic book, spoilers, he ends up getting shot in the chest and falling out. Or no, he gets shot in the chest in a helicopter that's exploding. And everyone was like, does that mean it's the end of the Joker? And it's like, no, the Joker never dies. And then later on, I haven't read a lot of the new stuff, but apparently they've made some sort of shenanigan happen that there have been multiple Jokers over the world or over time. And that's why, but I don't have all the facts to back that up.
Phantasm / Andrea has just made her debut in comics in late 2020 or 2021 as well, in the actual DC Comics Batman storylines. In the official continuity. Yeah, so they brought her in, and the animation for it looks awesome. For the drawings of Phantasm, great.
Cool.
So this movie, I was surprised at the way they used the Joker, that they felt the need to include the Joker at all, and how the mob just kind of goes to him like he's some regular guy working at a store that you just recruit whenever you need him, like he's a regular hitman. Hey, you take care of this. Or when Arthur Reeves goes to him and he's just totally confident going to ask for the Joker. I'm like, I can picture you going to find a hitman like, Deathstroke or something like that. But waltzing in to find the Joker again at wherever his lair is, because Arthur knows where that is, and just talks to him really casually. He's like, "Oh, okay. I just thought that was a little odd."
I think you're mistaken, if I may
Yeah.
offer. From what I understand, it's Sal Valestro goes to the World of Tomorrow or the Gotham City Fair where they're doing, and that's all decrepit now. It's all fallen apart and it's in disrepair. When Arthur Reeve comes to, he just goes into his office and the Joker is there. And the Joker is saying, "Hello, Arthur." And then it's like, you have to, like, here's the deal. They're killing all the mob bosses and they might come after me, but and it's Arthur is like, "I never even met you. I never met any of these people." And it's like, but you knew that the mob was involved with Carl.
Yeah. It is
and so it is the Joker going to Arthur.
Because it's like, because he found out that Phantasm is not Batman, and yet he's still interested in talking to Arthur about, it's like, what do you care if Arthur gets axed or not? Because it seems like, the mob bosses are their own thing and Joker's kind of his own thing. So I don't know, that was there. I didn't like how the flashbacks just kind of interspersed throughout, because it's like, to me, it was just really obvious from the beginning that Andrea was going to be Phantasm. Because if the story is about, like, this is the person who almost caused Bruce not to become Batman, and then it left, and it's like, and then she left. It's like, well, it's not going to be her dad, because her dad, even in the flashback, seems too old already, especially after 10 years on top of that, to be Phantasm. It's like, well, clearly it's going to be her, and that's going to be the conflict that Bruce has. It's not going to be that she got killed by the mob. And so it's like, okay, I could see that coming a mile away. The way he does, the detective story, a lot of action and stuff. I don't know. I just didn't really jive with this movie as much as I wanted to. I thought that, I was like, okay, scene after scene, again, because again, Batman just lets his guard down so easily to be discovered by her, and like, "Oh, you're Batman," and then she's kind of just down with that, and he's like, "Oh, okay," and then she saves him a couple nights later, and it's like, are you not going to put the pieces together and figure out why she's really that? Like, it took him a while to figure that out. I thought once she's kind of, it's like, dude, you don't see the coincidence that's going on here. And again, I felt that when they brought Joker into it, it kind of distracted a bit from the mystery of Phantasm and what this is really all about. Because they made it more of a showdown. In a sense, it became a showdown between Batman and Joker at the very end, because Andrea kind of backs off for a bit, and it's not until after all the explosions and stuff goes off that she comes back to take Joker. And once again, tying him into that, I thought was odd, because it's like, it sounded like it was a crime story. It started out as a crime story where she's trying to avenge her father's murder and avenge herself, and then, like, again, for some reason they decided to make the Joker formerly a gang member, which I thought was kind of, I was like, oh, okay. It felt like they did that because they just wanted Joker in there for recognizable, maybe to sell more tickets, because Mark Hamill's Joker is great.
Well, I think that is definitely something that was planned, especially back in the initial phases when it was supposed to be going either direct to video or to a TV movie of the week kind of thing. I had no problem with the Joker being a mob heavy, because that's how the backstory, as apocryphal or however you want to take it, the seeds of that had been planted in Batman 89. So I was okay with the Joker being associated with the mob before that. And at the time, like with Batman 89 and Mask of the Phantasm, I don't think at that time I had read The Killing Joke yet. I don't think I got to The Killing Joke until like 94, 95. And so I didn't know anything about the Red Hood or any of that. And so I understand where it kind of feels shoehorned in, but it didn't bother me. It just seemed like upping the stakes as opposed to going against the mob and then saying, oh, but wait, there's like an ace up their sleeve with the Joker, but he's off the hook now. Like, he's a rabid dog. And so I didn't mind that. The reveal of Andrea as the Phantasm also didn't bother me, because there's a bunch of misdirects, specifically the one where after attempting, like, Batplane comes in, Batman jumps out of the bat plane on level 5 so that it just goes on autopilot and lands on a nearby rooftop. Good work, Batman. And then Phantasm gets away because the police are chasing Batman. Batman barely escapes, and then Andrea shows up and spills the beans completely to throw Bruce off of the track. And the flashbacks of the relationship of Andrea and Bruce, I think that that's enough of an obfuscation, enough of a misdirect to blind Bruce's sentimentality. Like he's not thinking that it would be her. And then also 1993, the bad person is not going to be a lady. Is that a thing, or am I just projecting stuff?
Well, I'm pretty sure there were female villains in Batman, or there were definitely female villains in Batman before then.
No. Jennifer Lawrence was the first one. Never mind. That's an old joke by this point. I'm sorry. But yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
But the thing, I just felt because they keep pushing the relationship to talk about the origin, so they're making her clearly such an important figure in his life that as an audience member, that on top of what the Joker kind of to me started distracting from the Phantasm aspect of it, because it's a whodunit in a way. Like because everybody's so insistent this has got to be Batman, and we know it's not Batman, and the Joker quickly finds out that it's not Batman, and it's like, well, they keep the fact that all these flashbacks are also stretched throughout almost the entirety of the film, like rather than being say up front or whatever, kind of like how Batman Begins does all of its flashbacks within the first half, and then the rest of it is the second half is in the modern day. So with this, they're spending so much time on that. It's like, well, it seems like inevitable that she's going to have to be Phantasm, otherwise it would be a real half-assed reveal if it was just her dad or somebody else, because then who cares about that? Because the character who we really care about isn't her dad, it's her and their relationship. And we can see that when she said it had to do with her father, that, oh, well, it's going to have to, and any doubt goes away when you get to the flashback where she walks in on the meeting between Carl and the other mobsters, and he's telling her to go with it. It's dangerous. Like, okay, yeah, they killed him, and she's avenging him.
Yeah, and that
so much of the story from the criminal case aspect was focused around who's doing it and why. I thought they gave away their hand too early on that, which is why I didn't really jive with it as much, because like I figured out the mystery too quickly, or the solution to the mystery, if you will.
And I think that it was an unceremonious reveal because
she just kind of pulls the hood off and it's like, hi, because by then they know the audience has already figured it out as well.
All right. I see. And again, you watched it a little bit later in life than I did, and so I didn't know who it was. I was anticipating
it being. Watching it today may as well have been. I mean, it wasn't the first time, but the only thing I remembered about the story is that she was Phantasm. I didn't remember anything else about it, and so it was kind of a revelation to me watching it and realizing, oh yeah, that's right, she was a part of his origin story in this continuity. And so in a way, it was like I was watching it for the first time, and I didn't have any. But it had been long enough that I didn't have any flashbacks like, oh yeah, that's right, for each successive scene. It felt like I was seeing it for the first time.
Okay.
But it's still, I was like, wait, where does it come? And then it's like, aha, there it is. And I remember, because I remembered not being crazy about it the first time I saw it either, and it was for the same reason, because I figured out the mystery too quickly, which is the same way I felt about Knives Out. It's like you solve the mystery 45 minutes in, and then the rest of it is just like, yeah, it's fun, but it's not engaging from a mystery standpoint if you've already figured it out that early. And I felt the same way about Mask of the Phantasm.
Well, that's an interesting way to put it, just because I like going through these, we've done, this is our 6th.
Say 4, yeah, 5, 6.
And this is the one that made me feel feelings. Watching through all of them, like obviously 66, that made me amused. But in terms of sort of tugging at my heartstrings, in terms of the tragedy that is Batman, this is the first one that really, upon revisiting it, the decisions of Bruce being like, am I even allowed to be happy? And then when they meet Andrea in the cemetery and she's talking to her mother's grave, and that's how Bruce meets her in terms of, were you talking to me? And she's like, no. And it's so indignant, and then says, oh, do you know who that was, Mom? That was Bruce Wayne. And he's like, did you just say my name? So she's kind of crazy too. So I appreciate the development of like Andrea being torn away from Bruce, but she's also got a little bit of a screw loose. Bruce being committed or cemented into being Batman after Andrea leaves. It's basically he's got a broken heart, and so all he does, he almost fills that void with the revenge that he initially planned on. It's like, fine, nothing else is going to matter. I can only rely on myself. I will be the Batman. I found it to be an emotionally satisfying film. And I just find it interesting that you say, like, in terms of Knives Out as well, as being sort of an easy puzzle to unravel. I've heard the same opinions be regarded towards Glass Onion. However, with those movies, I found hanging out with the characters more interesting than the mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is. I found this one I found it to be emotionally resonant as a Batman movie, and until we get to like The Dark Knight, it essentially is the next time that I was like, oh man. And yeah, I sort of hold it up at that level, just in terms of as a dramatic Batman film. It evokes the emotions that I would expect from any other film.
I think I felt feelings more for, I think it's Sub-Zero, the Mr. Freeze movie, because it does such a good job at conveying his story, and how not only is it the love for his wife, but it's the extreme isolation he has, because if he even does save her, he's not really going to be able to be with her again in the same way, because he's stuck in this suit for the rest of his life. And so I felt a lot of more feelings for that, whereas this, because of the way it was told, with flashbacks sprinkled throughout, it felt like it was very heavy on plot. And so again, maybe it's because I've seen so many movies and I could piece mysteries like this together really quickly. I like that they focused on Bruce Wayne as a character more than in other films, like in the Burton films, even though I like the storyline of the Burton films more, or at least of the second of Batman Returns more than Batman 89. But this is a good movie. I'm just not as over the moon about it as everybody else is.
All right. Well, speaking of everybody else, and I'm not done yet with you, and first things first, no one is going to question your movie knowledge, Kat. You have seen more movies than me and most of the chat, and this isn't a slight against the chat, but yes, your film knowledge is encyclopedic. So thank you for speaking with me, who's just who is a kid who cries to the dulcet tones of the voice of Dana Delaney. Jill says, I didn't notice any problems with the animation. It was absolutely gorgeous to me. But I like the animation in the Star Trek animated series, so I have low standards. I wouldn't say you have low standards, Jill. Captain Infinity says Infinite Earths. I don't think it was called Crisis on Infinite Earths in the CW mashup. I think it was called On Multiple Earths or something. But if you're a CW Arrowverse fan, let me know below. Phil says, don't worry about spoiling the movie for me. I'll still watch it eventually. Well, we've done that, so you're welcome.
Yeah.
Andrea Beaumont is the Phantasm. Repeat. Jill says, it was clear to me when it was a flashback because of the story structure. Well, and also, like the Wayne's World, there was always that wavy dissolve that was happening every time there was a flashback. Jill says, love when, in both the flashback and present time, when Batman is kissing Andrea, Alfred walks in and right back out. And that's something that carries over between live action and the animated.
Alfred's that joke they do that a few times in the movie, which is kind of funny. And initially, the first time it happens, he's kind of happy because he's like, oh, Master Wayne, he's found love or something, which is something that is a recurring thing in the Burton films as well, where you could tell that Alfred really wants him to be with somebody, even if they're crazy like Selena. But so that was kind of fun to see that there.
And Alfred's played by Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., who was the second actor to play Alfred in the animated series. I forget the name of the first gentleman. He was ailing and had to pass the baton, if you will. And I only remember Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. from his mustache. It was legendary on Cesar Romero levels. Anti-derivative Jill says, what do I look like? Pest control? Man. Okay, so remember the part where Saul goes to the world of tomorrow and grabs Joker by the collar, and there's a close-up on the Joker. The entire background fades to red, and it's like, don't touch me. And it's so, I get so much characterization from the voice of Mark Hamill doing the Joker in this. It's so good. Just to gush for a moment. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious says, LOL. And for the sake of brevity, Matt G, hello, welcome. Antiderivative Jill says, this is basically just a perfect recap for a perfect movie. Ben is here. Cinema Gulp, Ben is here. This is a great film. One of the best of the bats. I think there should be arm wrestles. And then Jill goes on to say, it was amusing when Batman and Joker looked like kaiju fighting in the Future City model. I have the same feeling watching it again. It's been a long time since I've seen it. Oh, and also all the little toys that the Joker uses that he stole from the world of the future. I really enjoyed that. The flying helicopters. Although, speaking of helicopters, there is a moment where the police are shooting through the blades of the helicopter, and I was like, no. Edge of Time is here. Ahoy, Edge of Time. Thanks for stopping by. And Daniel's Hot Topic says, is this film canon, I wonder? I would say it's canon to the Timverse.
Probably.
But not to the overall, like, it's kind of like I would say Batman the Animated Series, Phantasm, The New Adventures of Batman and Robin, Superman the Animated Series, Justice League, and Justice League Unlimited are all in the same canon, is what I would assume. Which I don't think we're doing all of those because we'd be here until the 2030s.
Yeah. I was just looking through all the different Batman animated films there are on HBO, and there's so many of them. It's like, I can't. It's like, maybe I'll get to some of them, like the big one. I've seen some of them, but like Dark Knight on Halloween.
And I think that we've already discussed, we do want to talk about Batman Sub-Zero.
Yeah.
I kind of want to take a look at the Peter Weller Dark Knight Returns. But aside from, and I know Steve wants to take a look at Under the Red Hood. So we still haven't really formalized which of the animated we're going to be taking a look at. But in terms of all three of those, I think all three of those are in separate canons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the Under the Red Hood is a completely different thing than the Red Hood from The Killing Joke.
And yes. And there is there does come a point where they become adaptations of comic storylines, like Hush, Under the Red Hood, as you mentioned, Long Halloween. I would still I'd like to check those out because I've never turned my nose up at animation. In fact, I think that sort of more dramatic, not adult oriented. I'm not talking about Fritz the Cat here, but like more mature, if you will.
Yeah.
Animation is lacking, and so I do enjoy when something like The Dark Knight Returns shows up because I do want to see it. Although I don't think we're doing The Killing Joke, are we?
No, that one
isn't an adaptation, really.
The first 40 minutes. Well, the first 40 minutes has absolutely nothing to do with the comic, and it's there because they just wanted it to have a feature release because the rest of the story is too short. And then they made a couple of changes for, I guess, PC stuff with given what happens to Barbara Gordon in the story and how even the writers kind of regretted what they did to her in that story. And so they made some changes there. But the thing that makes it a real drag is just that first 40 minutes. It's just like what is this? And why does it's not like there's no reason for it to be there. But yeah, so that I would do that one.
Yeah, and yeah.
Whereas something like Hush, they changed the ending. And it's like, I get why they do it because they didn't want to just do it. But I think the straight up adaptation would have just been better.
Mm-hmm. Well, and both but I don't see what the problem is. Make a 40-minute feature release. I guess it wouldn't. I don't know if it wouldn't be worth it or make it a.
Yeah, because a long time ago, it didn't matter if something was 40 minutes or whatever. It could get how you define a feature is back in the day when movies were stuff coming out, there'd be multiple things they would be showing you in one sitting. The longest of the things they showed you was what was credited as the feature film and would have the biggest name up in lights on the poster type of thing, is the main attraction, if you will. And I think the shortest movies that still get theatrical releases, excluding like short films at art house festivals or whatever, would be like some of the Disney's best animated films were only like 65, 70 minutes, 75 minutes maybe. And they don't tend to do that anymore. They tend to at least be an hour and a half minimum now. But so yeah, I don't see a problem in doing something like, especially with things like Killing Joke, where it's not like it's getting a wide theatrical release. It's mostly direct to video anyway. So it doesn't really matter that it's not the full length, you know?
Well, and I remember when The Killing Joke came out, and again, the biggest complaint was what you just outlined in terms of the first 40 minutes having nothing to do with it. Obviously, just to elevate Barbara Gordon to as someone that you care about when she does get shot. But there was stuff in there that really didn't make sense for either Barbara or Bruce. Like, I don't think that Bruce would have had intimate relations with Jim's daughter. That doesn't make any sense. But yeah, hey, if you want to have a conversation about the comic stories, we can do like a top 5 of the comics if you want.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Cool. Jill says, I agree with the emotional satisfaction. They're meant to be together, but they both end up alone. But the mystery worked on me because I'm not as clever as Kat. Yeah. That's sort of how I felt about it is. And again, I was sort of fooled when I watched it. I guess I would have been about 15, 16 when I watched it. And I was sort of really invested in Batman, and it would take me in places that I didn't know. And the more and more you consume the Batman media, the more and more you somewhat sort of anticipate things that are going on. And also, if you've seen all the gajillions of films, check it. What's your review? Is it Letterboxd?
I have Letterboxd. I don't have reviews for everything there though.
Oh, okay, but you do have a lengthy list of reviews, and you can check out how many that you've seen.
Yeah, you can do that. I you can see how many movies I've seen and what ratings I gave them.
Yeah, which is if you're a fan of Cat, it's over there. Daniel's Hot Topic says, Scotty, the Black Flash, the main villain of the Flash movie, will have armor made of Kryptonian steel. There are rumors that the Black Flash made an alliance with Zod, and that is how he got the armor. That is that's interesting. How do you feel? Like, obviously, Michael Keaton's going to be coming back for the new Flash movie. Do you have an anticipation for that movie? Are you turned off by the Ezra that is Miller?
No, I'll watch it. I just have a feeling that the Batman stuff is going to be very minor because people have been theorizing that, oh, well, because of the Ezra Miller controversy, they could just reframe the whole movie as a Batman movie and call it like Batman Flashpoint. I'm like, not if he's not in the movie that much. And unlike, say, I think it's going to be similar to like Spider-Man No Way Home when they brought in Toby and Andrew for the last 40 minutes or whatever. I think it's going to be like that, or maybe even less. Because again, it's a Flash story. The story is basically him trying to alter time to save his mom or prevent her being killed, and that causes the timelines to merge. But I don't get the vibe that it's going to be heavy on Batman, because you listen to all the trades and read stuff like that, and they weren't talking about how it was a big Batman-esque movie. It's like, yeah, they're obviously going to use Keaton's return as a selling point, and they're going to have to now if they still go through with releasing the movie. But I don't think it's going to be something that's going to be huge. It'll be cool to see him in the suit, especially since he still looks great. I mean, when he was 65 when he played the Vulture in Spider-Man, he was so fantastic. So, like if they wanted to, if James Gunn didn't have this 10-year plus, like let them do an Elseworlds movie with just Michael Keaton as Batman again. He's still great for it. And then he's like, let's see, 6-7 years. He's like 72 this year. So it's like, and he still could do it. 72. He could still do it. You know, it's crazy that he could still pass for that as Batman. It's like, yeah, I would love to see that. You know, why not?
Well, and the dream would ultimately be a Batman Beyond where Michael Keaton plays elder Bruce.
Yeah.
There's an episode of Batman Beyond, and I'm sorry for the tangent before I move on in the chat, but there's an episode of Batman Beyond where Bruce gets captured by someone who is torturing him like mentally, and he's old and stuff, and trying to make him think he's going crazy. And through a series of events, Terry McGinnis, who is Batman in the future, in sort of a cyberpunk future of Gotham City, rescues Bruce, and then Terry is like, so how did you know that you weren't going crazy? And it's like the voice in my head kept saying Bruce, and that's not what I call myself. And Terry's like, so what do you call yourself? And then Bruce just looks at Terry, and it's like, should have known, should have known. Your pronouns are bat and man. Daniel says, R.I.P. to Kevin Conroy. You will be sorely missed. And now Mark Hamill wants to retire from the role of the Joker because I guess he can't work with anyone else's Batman.
I thought he had already retired from the role, but I guess not.
He had mentioned before that he wasn't going to go forward with it because it was such a strain on his voice. And that the only way he would do it again is if he could do the Killing Joke. And he did do the Killing Joke. And I don't think he's done anything since. But that was, I think that he had teased a little bit of retirement, but now it seems like it's final. It's one of those, I don't know. It just seems like it's a double act that you wouldn't want to go forward without. Daniel's Hot Topic says, Batman, the animated series, has a special place in my heart. Watched it back in 92 when I was 5, and it is great to this day. It's great animation for all ages. It's not kiddie animation. Yes, agreed. And speaking of which, like when I got the Blu-ray for it, which I super jazzed that I own the Blu-ray now, because that was a release that people had been clamoring for and it hadn't been released. It gives you the option of the theatrical release or the television release. I didn't watch the television release, but in the animated series, I think that there was like no gunplay allowed, no blood. And so this is definitely a harder animated series film, which I thought was superb.
Yeah, that's one of the tickers about the TV shows, that they weren't allowed to kill anybody. So it's like, what does the mob do? I mean, they're allowed to. Maybe they were allowed to talk about it, but they weren't allowed to depict it. So I haven't burned through a lot of the animated series left to see how they handle that when it comes to mobsters and other villains. But that's one of the reasons why I loved the Arkham Asylum versions of Batman and Joker the most. Also Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill, because it was just, Joker was so much more scary and lethal because he could be, and he could say darker things and implied a lot more darker stuff going on because it was a video game, and that's why I kind of like that more. But yeah, they're all still it's still a great show.
Yeah, well, and it's having gone through this, I want to pick up both because there are Blu-rays available for both Batman the Animated Series and Batman 66, and they have a place on my shelf as soon as I get myself some of that. What's it called? Money. And Daniel says, I love Michael Keaton as Batman, and I'm so excited The Flash will go to Earth 89 and meet Keaton's Batman. We have not seen that world since 92, and it will be 31 years in June. Is it the 31st anniversary of Batman 89? I suppose it is.
No, it's going to be the 34th anniversary of Batman 89 because it's 2023.
Right, and since 92 when we last visited the Burton.
And Batman Returns will be 31 in June, yes.
Right. And Dan continues to say, I also heard another rumor back in August of 2021. And I heard that the Flash was going to travel the multiverse. One of the universes he would go to is the Joel Schumacher Batman verse.
Maybe from a design standpoint, because they obviously couldn't get Val Kilmer back, and they're not. I don't think I've heard nothing about Tommy Lee Jones or Jim Carrey or any of those people coming back. So,
well, and I don't think Clooney would put on the cape again. If it doesn't matter how many dump trucks of money. Yeah,
and while the only two people I know really love doing those movies, Uma Thurman and Arnold Schwarzenegger, haven't heard anything about that either. So,
now, no, I don't want to drag out too much. There's just something that you did touch on, and yes, in terms of the Batman Year 2. I did, when I was sort of spreading this around, I was like, oh, this will be the animated version adaptation of Batman Year 1. And you corrected me in one of the messages and said it's Batman Year 2. Now, I agree with you in terms of the Phantasm, but that first night that Bruce goes out and tries to take down the thieves who are stealing the truck of cigarettes or whatever, it is very much the Batman Year One, where he goes out and tries to be the vigilante without the bat
Right.
suit.
I meant, like, when people say Batman Year One, they think of the storyline Batman Year One primarily,
Right.
and that's not what this is.
There are adaptative sort of scenes that are lifted from Batman Year One. That scene specifically, the one that I just mentioned.
Yeah.
And then also in terms of when Bruce suits up as Batman for the first time, and then Alfred sees it and is like, dear God. And so there are moments that are and possibly as a compromise, I've never read Batman Year Two. I've read Batman Year One. There are things that obviously they lean more on the more traditional mob bosses, like your Maronis and your Falcones. But I thought the flashbacks sort of rang to Year One with the addition of Andrea, which I thought was kind of cool, and then incorporating some of that mysterious origin of the Joker. And as the Joker in The Dark Knight said, it wasn't even that. It was in The Killing Joke, where he says, I like my history to be multiple choice.
Right.
But how many of them there batarangs are you going to give the Mask of the Phantasm?
You go first.
9.
Oh, Jesus.
I know, man. I'm sorry. This is again.
No, I'm trying to think what I should give it then. I'll give it 6.
6.
6 batarangs.
And one of the reasons that I give it a 9 is, as you mentioned, Stacy Keach is in here. We get Dick Miller. We got Abe Vigoda. We've got the Paul Costanzo. Is that? I think it's Paul Costanzo. I think it's Paul. Maybe I'm mixing up Paul Costanzo and Paul Sorvino. Robert Costanzo. I stand corrected. Robert Costanzo, who was in Die Hard 2 and played Joey Tribbiani's dad, amongst many other things. The voice to Hart Bochner, Ellis from Die Hard, and
Yes.
incredible. Dana Delaney, as I said before, I appreciate everyone in this movie, and it's fun to sort of, hey, wait a second, I recognize that voice. Who is it? And this is one of those movies when I was watching it, for the first time, and subsequently I go, it's an watch to the end of the credits. I know everyone does that all the time. If you're a true film purist, I usually only do it if I need to find a song from the soundtrack, or if I want to find out if Nicky Cat is in the movie. For some reason, I have to find out if Nicky Cat is in a particular movie. And that comes into play because Nicky Cat was in Batman and Robin, and he's going to show up again in The Dark Knight, which is dope. So yeah, 6 and a 9. That's, hey, it's above failing, Cat. So it's a decent score. Daniel's Hot Topic says, in the Joel Schumacher Batman verse, in the present, Chris O'Donnell would now be Nightwing, the new protector of Gotham City after Bane broke Batman's back. That's interesting. Would you care to see a Nightwing adaptation or film?
Yeah, why not? I mean, I remember, like a lot of people, it was exciting to think that they would do a Nightwing with Joseph Gordon-Levitt at the end of Dark Knight Rises, when that's kind of the tease of where that character is going to go. But even though they were never going to do that, but that still would have been fun. And to see a Nightwing story, like, why not? If they do Batman Beyond, and they have done Batman Beyond, like, animated, so yeah, Nightwing could be cool.
It would be cool. There's something that irks me about seeing Batman stories being told without Batman. In the same way that I get irked when I see Venom without Spider-Man, or Morbius without Spider-Man, although I didn't see either of those. When aside from the entire world saying don't watch Batwoman, it was like, I don't need to because Batman's not in it. And same thing with with Titans. Although I thought, doesn't Batman show up in Titans again?
I don't know. Again, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, me either. I thought he did. But I could be wrong. But yeah, I'd like to see. If I'm going to go see a Batman property, I'd like to see Batman in it, and I think that's part of the reason why Birds of Prey, the original television series with Mia Sara as Harley Quinn, I think that was something that audiences didn't necessarily tune into because, okay, it's a Batman story without Batman. Daniel's Hot Topic says it would be awesome if they would do that storyline, but now I guess they may not do it, but maybe they can do it in The Flash 2. Oh, your high hopes, Daniel. The Flash 2. Let's get The Flash 1 out of the gate first. And Dan continues to say, so now that Ben Affleck is gone, will not return for the role because he has other priorities. He has to take care of Jennifer Lopez. But now that he is out, I think Keaton may be in the new DCU. I don't know. I thought Batfleck was going to be back in The Flash. I thought that
I thought there were rumblings about that too, and I think he's going to show up. Or maybe that's for Aquaman 2. He's rumored to show up.
Right. DC is a very strange place right now, like in terms of what they're planning on doing with the films. I don't know. And it's my usual rule. Like I'm looking forward to seeing it, whatever it is. It's the same rule that I have when it comes to James Bond. They can announce James Bond, they can show me a trailer, but until I see it on screen, I'm not going to believe it, and I won't judge it until he says Bond, James Bond. Same deal with any other property. If I'm either interested by it or I'm not. Phil is here still. Thanks, Phil. Says, laugh out loud, someone's not a Batfleck fan. Or maybe a Jennifer Lopez lack of appreciation. Either way, I'm just happy. You know what? I'm just glad that they're happy together. Daniel's Hot Topic says, can you imagine George Clooney in a wheelchair after Bane broke his back and he is the new Oracle of that universe? I think that's a bridge too far for me, Dan.
Yeah. I can't.
And Daniel's Hot Topic says, yeah, Jason Momoa said, and keeps hinting that there will be multiple Batmen, and he filmed scenes with multiple Batmen. However, he does not know which one they will go with. Oh, that's kind of cool. Kind of like how they animated different versions of Who Shot Mr. Burns. But yeah, not necessarily the animated Batman film that you were looking forward to. Obviously, the Batman animated film that we deserve. But what is next? Are we going to continue on in the animated, or we haven't really discussed this yet?
No, we haven't. Well, it depends. What is your access for the animated?
I have just found out that I have an Oracle of my own. Anti-Derivative Jill has been pleasant enough to allow me access to her media. And so I said it was going to be kind of tough for me to be able to watch HBO Max, being a Canadian. But she said that she could help with that. So it doesn't seem that I have that much of an issue.
Oh, Sub-Zero could be a fun one. The Mr. Freeze one.
We're doing Mr. Freeze next?
Yeah, that one's only an hour long, about.
Okay. And do you want to do Sub-Zero and then briefly touch on some of our favorite Batman comic book arcs?
Sure. Yeah, we can do that.
And it'll be a mishmash of Batman. It'll be a Batman potpourri. And
I'll also, in the same instance, if we're going to talk about comics, I'll talk about their adaptation of Hush, which the animated version is different than the comic.
Was that released?
Yeah, Hush. That's on HBO Max as well, and that's I just saw the 4K Blu-rays even over at the local retailers. Oh, nice. But it's been out for 3.5 years now. It's been out, I think.
The animated Hush has been out for 3 years.
Yeah, it came out 2019.
Oh my God, I got it. Well, I'd like to check that.
We could watch that one next week.
Okay. Do you want to okay. So, let's
I might, because I found out I probably won't be here on Wednesday, February 8th. That might be another hiatus week.
Sure.
So February 1st, if you want, we could watch, because Hush is more, I think it's an hour 20 minutes, hour 15, hour 20, something like that. So it's closer to, similar to this. But if you like Hush and you want to read that one, we can go over that.
Well, okay. Do you want to do Hush and Sub-Zero, or
we can? Yeah.
Okay. All right. Then
because I don't know if it has to be, if we necessarily have to split them into multiple. We can, if you want, we could just split them into multiple episodes. Like you said, we could do Sub-Zero and go over some of our comics, or do a two-teamer of Sub-Zero and Heart of Ice.
Okay.
For one episode, because that's actually a better idea. Sub-Zero and Heart of Ice could be an episode, because those are like the two best Mr. Freeze things, and then Hush could be its own episode, because that's again feature length, like Phantasm was.
Okay. Well, then let's go with Hush next week.
Yeah.
And then when we come back on the 15th, the day after Valentine's Day, we can deal with Sub-Zero Heart of Ice for Nora.
Yes, exactly. That'll be more. That's perfect, because it's more Valentine's Day themed, so that'll be fantastic.
I can dig it. Okay. All right. We have a plan. Let me write that down. So, yep. We're going Hush and then Freeze. Excellent. Then I guess we'll just finish up the chat and get out of the Dodge. Dan goes on to say, in the Joel Schumacher Batman verse, in the present, Chris. Oh, no, I read that one. It would be awesome if they would do that storyline, but now I guess they may not do it, but maybe they can do it in the Flash. Oh, I've already done. Okay, hang on.
You've read that one too.
Jason Momoa. All right, here we go. Phil brings us back to the chat. Thank you for keeping me honest, Phil. Yep, been here the whole time. Not much to say since I haven't seen it. Just watching for support. I appreciate it. It very much. Daniel says, but I think that the Flash will create a new DCU. However, since he will merge different timelines to create this new DCU, that is how we may get multiple Batman and characters in one universe. That's interesting. I don't know. I feel like a Crisis on Infinite Earths would be a better way to bring that together. But I don't know. I'm more of a Marvel guy, but LDG Free the Net. Ahoy, sir.
Oh, wow. Pleasure. Yeah. I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, it's been good. I know that you've probably been keeping track of certain goings on between certain personalities. And I would love to, I'd love to have a chat and talk to you about everything that's going on about contract disputes and $50 million. LDG says, love you all. Love you too, sir. Anti-Derivative Jill says, this was a perfect characterization of Batman in mannerisms and actions. The voice acting is taken as perfectly seriously as live action with riveting dialogue and a complex story. 9 out of 10. I agree. I'm right there with you. Extraneous A++ or extraneous. I don't know if you were trying to say a swear. I don't know. Daniel's Hot Topic says, but anyway, finally, we will see General Zod in the Tim Burton Batman universe, Earth 89, and we will find out why we have not heard of a Batman on that world. The rumor is Zod kills. Oh, heard of Superman on that world? The rumor is that Zod kills baby Kal-El on Krypton. It's a possibility. Again, I appreciate the speculation, but until I smell the popcorn and the lights go down, I do not know.
That would explain a lot of why we haven't heard of Superman on the Tim Burton Batman. Are you talking about Tim Burton Batman Earth, as if specifically the Burton continuity? If that's the case, I don't think he had any interest in Superman. I don't think there's a in sub-universe reason as to why he doesn't show up, because I know they reference Superman and Metropolis in Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, but I'm not sure if, because even with his last comment, I'm not, unless he's talking about the comic series Batman 89, and maybe they talked about it in there, because that's despite being titled Batman 89, it's a direct sequel to Batman Returns, and continuing. It's basically the third version if Tim Burton had done it. I haven't read it yet. A friend of the channel, Tom Jr. Jackson, has read it. He has it. Maybe he could tell us if it features Superman or Metropolis. I don't know.
And Dan, it sounds like you're about 10 years younger than me, and so you are sort of living in a great era for this stuff. And I don't know. I remember for the longest time hearing, like, even in Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, hearing them talk about Metropolis and hearing Batman reference Superman, and just my brain sparking with they said one word that made it so that they all existed in the same world. That was enough. And now we're living in a world where you can, what do you want? You want Green Arrow? You want the Flash? You want Aquaman? You want who do you want? Who do you want? We'll put them all in the centrifuge and we'll mix them together. So yeah,
that's kind of like why I'm curious what they're going to do with the events of the Flash and Aquaman 2, given that Jason Momoa has already confirmed that he's got a role as a new DC character. So that basically means that Aquaman is effectively dead, I guess, because I doubt they're going to have him play two of them simultaneously. I'm not dead as in like the character being killed, but like I don't think there's going to be an Aquaman 3, in other words. I mean, they could do it for the hell of it, but I don't know if they will now that they've cast him as somebody else. And if Batman does show up in the Lost Kingdom, has been rumored, that's going to be even weirder because, as my friend Ernesto said, big DC fan, it's like, well, we got DC movies coming out this year which really have no bearing on anything because they're part of the old Snyderverse, which is being basically jettisoned in favor of the new direction. And I said, yeah, that's kind of interesting, and we'll see how that plays.
Well, and again, it is something with Flashpoint and traveling to different Earths. It's I don't know how they're going to do it. They obviously have to do something creatively. They can't just say, okay, we're starting new. But I don't know how any of this is going to work. And, speculation is fun, but smell of popcorn and lights going down. That's how we'll know for sure. And after the fact, fans of whatever you want to watch are going to say that was good or that was bad. And that's the way I prefer it. I'd rather go in hoping and then be disappointed, or going in with a meh attitude and then being blown away, which has happened, on both sides of that spectrum. Dan says, can you imagine General Zod versus Michael Keaton's Batman? Sadly, no.
Yeah, I can't picture that either.
I think Zod would
I suppose it depends on who's playing Zod, but even then, I can't picture it.
Just laser eyes.
Yeah.
Dan says, I really think the Flash will go back into the multiverse for the Flash 2. Number one, they already have a script, and they will bring back Ezra Miller as the Flash in the new DCU.
Do not count on it. Forget it. That ain't happening. They'd be dumber than any. They can't do that at this point. I'm sorry. It's done. He's not even going to. They can't even put him on the press tour. I mean, plus we don't know how long Ezra's going to be in rehab. And then there's the other charges, which are still pending for the other legal issues. So it's like, no, they're not. It'd be completely absurd at this point. Seeing this is the same studio which fired Johnny Depp just for the accusation against him to keep Ezra Miller after all this bullshit. No. And yes, they may already have a script, but they don't need Ezra Miller. Like, I remember somebody at DC even mentioned that they didn't understand why they cast Ezra Miller as the Flash in the first place when they already had that other actor who was really popular on the Flash TV show from the CW. They're like, just use him. And so it would be crazy to bring back. It's like they can't bring back Ezra Miller at this point. It's just they'll lose all credibility for any of their other past decisions that they've made when it comes to canceling people. And it's frankly, since there's a lot of question marks as to why Ezra went off the rails, I've read certain publications which have suggested what was going on. There's no guarantee that just because somebody goes to rehab doesn't mean they're going to, stay clean and sober or whatever. That's not a guarantee. And I don't picture a studio, particularly with David Zaslav, who's in the mood for cutting costs right now, to run that kind of a gamble, no matter how much they think they might make on. It's like, do we want to risk that? I don't see it.
I don't either. And
that's
yeah.
not even me. That's not me endorsing cancel culture. I don't really like endorsing that and doing that. But given that Ezra has been a firecracker and doing all sorts of a crazy legal thing, I would just genuinely not trust Ezra to stay clean or stay out of trouble to the point that I would risk like $200 million on a movie. It's like, I don't think so.
Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, I like Ezra in the role of Flash. It's not going to impede my Ezra's other bullshit is not going to impede my enjoyment of the movie, assuming that it's good and I like it. Because so yeah.
I sort of agree with you. I'm going to see I don't know. We'll get when we get closer because I still have a burr under my saddle about Ezra, but we'll see. We'll see. And also, as describing Ezra Miller as the Flash, if we misspoke in terms of our pronouns, we just forgot. Sorry.
Oh yeah.
I can't remember. It wasn't a slight. It was just we can't keep track. Dan says, I also hear that WB wants to get Tom Hanks as Jay Garrick in The Flash too. Tom Hanks would be a great Jay Garrick. Dan, you know more about The Flash than I do. I don't know any. Do you know who Jay Garrick is?
No.
And unfortunately, we'll talk all about it next week on our Flash show.
And also, while that may be true that they have a sequel script for The Flash, even if you disregard the whole Ezra Miller thing, let's say that didn't happen and there was no controversy, does it fit into James Gunn's new 10-year plan? Because apparently Aquaman doesn't, and Black Adam doesn't. I wonder if that will extend to James Gunn's own version of the Suicide Squad. They might not. Assuming, I mean, I would like them to keep certain characters like Amanda Waller. I think Viola Davis is perfectly cast in that role. And then again, James Gunn also did the Peacemaker series, which he said there's going to be another season of. But will that also carry over into the new DCU now that we hear that, Doom Patrol and Titans are going to cancel, even though they weren't part of the extended universe? So it's its own thing. But that's the thing. I don't know. It's kind of like when you're doing something like that, it's like don't play favorites and save your shows and movies, but then cancel everybody else's because that makes you look kind of like a jerk. So that's a thing. I don't know if the Ezra Flash even factors in. Like even if they were to and the thing with the Ezra Flash, they could easily work their way around it logically because if you're dealing with a multiverse scenario, they could just bring in a different version of the Flash to replace him, and they could still go through with the script. But again, I don't think that's a big question mark as to whether the sequel script that you're pointing out, Dan, is even valid still in the James Gunn universe.
Like so many questions as to what's going. We don't even have a Superman yet. It's all over the place. Daniel says, yeah, I was talking about Superman in the Earth 89 Tim Burton Batman universe. We never heard of him. Also, the Joel Schumacher Batman universe is not the Burton verse. There is a big hint in Batman Forever. In Batman Forever, when Val Kilmer has the flashback, and the guy who shot Bruce's parents was not Jack Napier. It was another guy shrouded in darkness. I do have thoughts on that. I do think that it was Jack Napier because of the actor who was cast was physically similar, and they do reference Chase Meridian does reference skin tight latex and a whip, which would, I guess that's a Catwoman reference. It doesn't.
And then you have Michael Goff and Pat Hingle still playing Alfred and Gordon.
That's true too.
But again, I'm not sure, Dan, when you call it Earth 89, is that what they officially call it on like the DC website or something? I'm not familiar, but again, the Burton films are their own thing, and he had never had any intention to bring in Superman. I don't think there needed to be an Elseworld or some type of explanation as to why Superman and Metropolis were never mentioned. I just don't think Tim Burton ever had any intention for them to be a part of that universe. It was just its own thing, kind of like how, contrary to what the Warner Brothers executives wanted, which was to incorporate the Christian Bale Batman into the DC extended universe, no one's like, no, that's its whole separate continuity, and they at least honored that, which is why they ended up creating a new continuity with Ben Affleck for the Snyderverse.
Well, and also at the time when you had Batman 89, or when you have Batman 89 and Batman Returns, the idea of putting Batman and Superman in the same movie was sort of like splitting splitting your bets. You weren't going to make as much money. You were going to make a lot of money with a Batman movie and a lot of money with a Superman movie. And no matter how successful a Batman Superman movie was going to be in the mid 90s, it wasn't going to be as successful as those two separately. And then the obvious. So it is, again, that's looking back on Batman 89 through the prism of the shared universe is great. It's great to talk about and it's great to think about, but financially, I don't think it ever would have been a thing. Dan goes on to say Grant Gustin would be a great Flash. He is in the Flash TV series. Oh, okay. Yeah. He is the Flash in the TV series. Yeah, and also, well, and that's the same thing. Like Christopher Reeve said that Tom Welling would have been the person to pick up the mantle of Superman in the movies, but that never happened. And again, you're just talking about continuity and canon, which everyone absolutely adores nowadays.
Well, that's the thing that I was also confused about when James Gunn said his logic for recasting Henry Cavill was that he wants to tell a Superman story where he's only a couple years into being Superman or his job at the Daily Planet. And I'm thinking, Henry Cavill looks just the same age today as he did 10 years ago when they filmed Man of Steel, 10 and a half years ago now. But I think the real reason is that you're basically kind of hinting that it's going to be a new continuity. Like, it's not going to be the Snyderverse story arc of Superman. It's not like they're going back on that timeline and telling an earlier, oh, here's an earlier sequel to Man of Steel that we didn't tell you about. I think it's just going to be a new continuity. And saying that, oh, he's too old is just their way of trying to have a simple excuse because maybe they thought it would sound worse if they said they were just scrapping the whole Snyderverse, which I noticed they're kind of averse to saying that. But to me, it's kind of clear that that's what they're doing because, in a sense, it's necessary. It caused too much confusion to say which aspects are canon, which aspects isn't. And given that these movies are timeless, are going to be around forever, it would be much better to just scrap everything you've done. As hard as the decision as it is for the last 10 years, scrap it and just start from scratch and build from there. Assuming that it works. Yeah.
It's not without precedent. How many reboots of Spider-Man did we get in a very short period of time?
Yeah, we had like 3 reboots in the span of 14 years.
Yeah. Tom Jr. Jackson, friend of the show. Hey, everyone. And hello to Jill. And Jill says hello.
Oh, and if you're here, Tom, tell us in the comments, are there any references to Superman and Metropolis in the Batman 89 comic that you have? We've been having a discussion about that.
Fantastic. Captain Finity says it was Jack in Killing Joke. Was that? I don't know. Did they ever say his name in the Killing Joke?
I don't recall that they said his name, but you could tell they drew heavy inspiration in Batman 89 in terms of the Ace Chemical plant. And of course, they didn't have the part about the toy factory, which I always thought was weird that you need to sneak through a chemical factory to drill into the wall of a toy factory to rob the set. I'm like, why don't you just break into the toy factory? I never really got that logic, but okay. But
zoning in Gotham.
Yeah, and so that kind of homages it in that respect.
Oh, and Daniel says Jay Garrick is Earth 2 Flash.
Oh, okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Oh, Tom Hanks. That must be. I guess that would be like an older adult, like maybe retired, like almost like a Batman Beyond version of the Flash. Then, because I'm not familiar as much with the Flash in the comics, but he's usually younger, like in his like teens and 20s and stuff. So I'm not. Again, I haven't read enough to know.
I'm barely familiar with John Wesley Shipp Flash. I remember watching it when I was a kid, but aside from that,
I remember his name. I don't remember that.
Oh, he was the actor. It doesn't matter. Daniel says we need Ezra Miller Flash to connect the old DCEU to the multiverse. Earth 89 Michael Keaton to the new DCU. Continuity is important.
Yeah, but that's why I'm thinking this continuity is going to go out the window now that James Gunn, because he says he has a 10-year plan, and I highly doubt, given out, because remember, this was in September when they were almost at the end of negotiations to get Dan Lin to head DC. The negotiations fell through. They picked James Gunn. He almost said yes immediately. I highly doubt that he had sat around planning how to rationalize what's going to be canon, what's not going to be canon, how are we going to go forward. I highly doubt it. Like, he has a 10-year plan. I can't remember the story arc in particular, but people have already been theorizing as to what it is. And I mean, yes, the Ezra Miller Flash in the Flash movie will use the multiverse to connect to Michael Keaton. Yes, we know that because it's going to be a multiverse story. But that's not going to be there. I highly doubt that's going to be there going forward. Granted, they were open to doing a third Wonder Woman with Patty Jenkins once they decided they didn't like the creative direction, blah, blah, blah. Because again, their studio, it's open. If it's making money, they'll be open to it, which is why I'm curious if Aquaman 2 joins the $1 billion club like Aquaman 1 did, will that change the conversation about, oh, because even though Jason Momoa has been cast as a new character, I mean, I guess you could say play two characters if it's a separate continuity, if they're doing multiverse for that. I don't know. So, I mean, yeah, continuity is important, and I think the continuity will be maintained for the rest of the Snyder movies. I just don't think that's going to matter going forward for whatever James Gunn is doing.
Well, and also, while I am a fan of continuity because it does tickle my brain and all my nostalgia feelings and all that jazz, don't forget that if you rely too much on continuity, then you could end up with a Superman Returns, which is by no means a terrible movie, but also when you it muddies the waters for not everybody is going to be as well versed in terms of the DC cinematic universe or extended universe, however you want to frame it. Some people are just going to say, I want to see Superman. Superman left Earth for 5 years. What happened? I don't get it. This doesn't make sense to taking a 5-year-old. And so if you're beholden to previous continuity, it can be somewhat frustrating or confusing to the general audience. And for quadrant films, you want to get as many butts in seats. And if you say this is a springboard off of something, you want to please the diehards, and you want to introduce or invite new fans alike. At least that would be my experience with those sort of situations. Tom Jr. Jackson says Gunn put Viola Davis and Idris Elba in the Suicide Squad because they both wanted to work with him just as much as he wanted to work with them.
Yeah, I guess that also, because again, not only did he bring back Viola Davis from the David Ayer Suicide Squad, but he also brought back, Harley Quinn. He brought back Joel Kinnaman. He brought back what's his name as Captain Boomerang. So he brought back quite a few characters. Granted, he killed off most of them except for Harley Quinn and Amanda Waller, but he still brought them back, indicating that despite that they didn't want to put the number 2 on it, is still a sequel to the 2016 movie. I don't know, given that he was open to bringing back Harley Quinn and Joel Kinnaman and Captain Boomerang, that he would have recast Amanda Waller otherwise. I think he would have kept her anyhow.
Well, when you have Viola Davis.
Exactly. That too.
I agree with Captain Finity. DC continuity is a hot mess. And that's sort of something that I hope at some point, based on the popularity and however James Gunn plans on moving forward with DC, that it does eventually lead to a DC Crisis on Infinite Earths. I hope that there is that big event that isn't sort of like rushed as...
Well, I know they mentioned at the last, I can't remember if it was the last DC fandom or the one before, that DC going forward was going to be, the entirety of it was in a multiverse. So that way the Reeves thing can be its own universe. The Snyderverse can be its own thing, and then and yes, that's why the Snyderverse can cross over with the Keatonverse, as is going to happen in the Flash. And it was basically their way of saying that we're never going to shut the door on a great script just because it doesn't fit into continuity. Because I think that's a problem Marvel has had, because there's plenty of great stories they could have told. Like with Captain America, for instance, when the first one was set in the 40s, and they made it feel like a cheesy propaganda film, and they homaged, that was the exact reason that Captain America was invented in reality in the first place as a comic book. I figured, wouldn't it be great if the sequel was set in the 50s and was about the Red Scare, and you have him scoring off against the Red Guardian, and have the threequel set in like late 60s, early 70s, when you have all the rebelling against the government upheaval, because you can have a lot of great American political type stories going on there, especially with Captain America and everything he represents. It would be great, but they couldn't, because it's a shared universe, and we have to shoehorn him into 2011 to be with the Avengers. And as a result, you don't get any other potentially great Captain America stories you would otherwise get, because of, continuity. And you see that with other characters as well. So DC is like, no, we're not going to create that problem. We're never going to slam the door on a great script. We're just going to say everything's a multiverse and leave it at that. And which is why I'm excited that they do Elseworlds movies. Like, while I wasn't crazy about it, I thought the fact that they did Joker, the Todd Phillips one, was really cool. And I hope they do more films, in that vein as like standalones. Like, not everything has to be franchised out. I mean, I know that Phillips and Phoenix said they weren't going to sequelize Joker, and now they are, because I don't think anybody expected that. Even them did not expect that movie to make $1 billion and get all those Oscar nominations, but it did. So, I mean, at least they waited and didn't immediately rush it. Like, they're trying to come up with a good idea. Like, I don't know if they've started filming this. I think they've already started filming the sequel. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're saying it's going to be a musical means that they're at least being very creative and not just doing a cheap thing, the same thing again.
Yeah.
So yeah, the continuity issue. I'm very curious to see what James Gunn will retain and what the first official project will be as part of his 10-year plan. Like, what's that first movie going to look like?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I don't know if it's going to have the same feeling as like this is the beginning of a new series, or if it's going to sort of dovetail off. Well, obviously it's going to dovetail because there are going to be crossovers from previous incarnations. So again, it's a wait and see sitch. Dan says, I wish Batman and Robin had the sequels Batman Unchained and Batman Triumphant. In Batman Unchained, I heard Scarecrow would have shot Batman with fear toxin and he would see old foes like the Joker. I remember hearing that too.
Yeah, Joker and Penguin and guys like that. But Batman Triumphant was never a thing. That was a miscommunication or a misprint, and people thought that was going to be the name, but it was only Batman Unchained. They didn't have, there was no Batman Triumphant, even though I think that's not a bad title for, for what's going on back in those days.
It seems like a spoiler in the title, though.
Sort of, yeah.
Anyway, Dan says we could have seen Jack Nicholson, Joker, Danny DeVito's Penguin, Tommy Lee Jones' Two-Face, Jim Carrey's Riddler, Uma Thurman as Poison Ivy, and Arnold Schwarzenegger's Mr. Freeze. It would have connected all of the movies. And again, I think you're looking through a prism of modern day sensibilities into something that ultimately, while financially successful, it was. The landscape of the movie industry in the late 90s, early 2000s was very different from what you're getting in the early 20s of the 21st century. Sadly, it didn't happen. And again, if they decide to incorporate that in the Batman 89 comic.
I'm kind of glad that didn't happen because they didn't really need to tie the Burton-verse more directly with the Schumacher-verse, and I really didn't want to see the Schumacher-verse continue, even though Schumacher said allegedly that, or he did claim for certain that allegedly Batman Unchained was going to be darker. And it's like, but would it have been, given the way, you took a major step down tonally between, Batman Forever is so goofy as stuff, but Batman and Robin is a whole other level of just, so would they have really gone back up to do Batman? I don't know. And did it need to be tied in? And then there's the issue, would you have even gotten those actors to reprise the role?
Mm-hmm. Tommy Lee Jones was not coming back.
Yeah, he wasn't coming back. I don't think Jack Nicholson would have come back for a movie that tonally goofy and just off the wall, whereas Danny DeVito said that he still keeps that portrait that Tim Burton gave him of the Penguin boy sitting with the yellow ball outside the circus tent, and he keeps it with him where he goes. Because that resonated with him so much, even though he recently wrote a Penguin story as part of DC Villains' 30th anniversary, which has no bearing on the Penguin character whatsoever. Like, Penguin and Catwoman from Batman Returns team up to surreptitiously vaccinate the world against COVID. Really? Are they? I'm like, are they QAnon people who think that's going to poison people and that's why they're doing it? Oh no, they think they're helping people. It's like, Penguin doesn't care about helping people, so I don't know what that's about. But but the fact that he carries it with him, he likes that Tim Burton-esque version of it, and I don't know if he would have come back for, Batman Unchained. Which what does that really mean when you say Unchained in a movie like, Batman and Robin?
Dan says Batman Unchained and Batman Triumphant would have been darker than Batman Forever, but not as dark as Batman 89 or Batman Returns. I think that there was conversations on the DVDs in regards to the anticipated continuation with Joel Schumacher that never came to fruition.
Right, and another thing I would say to Daniel, that another good reason I think that Batman Triumphant didn't happen is the fact that they were just gonna make Coolio, who cameoed in Batman and Robin, as the banker who takes the bets for the motorcycle race, and turn him into Scarecrow. And it's like, why? Because again, they weren't thinking. Yeah, like for instance, I can't remember what movie it was, but Arnold Schwarzenegger was on the lot filming another movie, and the executives just decided, hey, he's here. Let's just go ask him if he wants to play Mr. Freeze. Like, they didn't put much thought into this, which is bizarre because in Batman Returns, I get that the movie didn't do what they needed it to do at that time, but they still put a lot of care and thought into who they were going to cast in those roles. So I don't know why there was a sudden drop off. I guess in the spirit of it being toyetic, but I don't picture, no offense to Coolio, he was kind of big at the time, but is that something that's going to sell a lot of Scarecrow toys? I don't know.
I always heard it was going to be Goldblum. So.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So Superman 78 comic is fantastic. Tom says, yes, he showed me a picture of that the other day.
These are, I would love to check those out. It's been a while. since I've bought a comic. Dan says WB wanted to replace George Clooney with as Batman with Jeff Bridges, and Batman in those movies that would have been so cool. What do you think of Jeff Bridges as Batman in Batman Unchained and Triumphant?
I can't see it. I mean, he's a bigger, taller guy that could be intimidating, maybe in the bat suit, but I'm trying to picture him as Batman and as Bruce Wayne, and I'm having a hard time picturing that. That's just me.
Yeah. Well, it's the same. Like I still haven't seen The Batman. I have nothing against Robert Pattinson. And I have no judgment upon him being Batman until I see him do it. And so it's an interesting speculation if it had happened at the time, but again, it's only speculation. Cap Infinity says continuity is important, but not to anyone at Warner Brothers. Continuity is important, but if you're chained to that continuity and moving forward, then that also stifles creativity. And I don't think the continuity of the films are as important as the individual stories. If you want to write a trilogy, produce the trilogy, film the trilogy. But if you say, okay, now we have to look again, you get Superman Returns, and that'll be my argument for we have to be beholden to all continuity. I don't think you do.
I don't think continuity is an issue right now because it's like the Snyderverse. It's still the Snyderverse. It's just that we're in the transitional period, but I think they could do a better job at labeling what is what. Like, does Peacemaker exist in, like, the Snyderverse? Like, does Suicide Squad and, like Suicide Squad, the sequel, The Suicide Squad, Black Adam, and Peacemaker are all connected because Peacemaker is in the Suicide Squad movies, Amanda Waller is in the Suicide Squad movies and Black Adam, and this, and then because Superman shows up at the end of Black Adam, then that's tied into Man of Steel and the rest of it. So that's in a sense all part of the Snyderverse. But given that, again, there's going to be a second season of Peacemaker, sure, you can do that and set it in the Snyderverse to be fine, assuming it's not going to have anything to do with whenever. Because again, we haven't James Gunn's 10-year plan. We don't know what the tentative start date is for that, or what the first project is going to be, or like the upcoming other DC film that I haven't seen any trailers for, only the poster, Blue Beetle. What's that going to be? Is that just an Elseworlds movie? If so, I think they need to have, much like the comics have labels for like DC Black or New 52 when they had that going on, and Elseworlds, I think they need to start putting labels on these movies or projects to make it clear to people what they are. And as far as I know, Doom Patrol and Titans were their own thing and their own separate continuities. So, and again, admittedly, it's complicated when you think that, Wonder Woman 84 didn't make much money. It tanked kind of with fans and critics, but they were still open to bringing her back to do a third movie. And even though they're not bringing Patty Jenkins back, they're like, oh, we're open to keeping Gal Gadot. It's like, that's admittedly where it's going to become an issue, because it's like, oh, you're going to keep some of the Snyderverse cast members, but dump others. So that's going to, well, again, we'll know more at the end of the year once these other DC movies are out and done with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I don't think we're going to hear anything about the James Gunn universe until this time next year, once Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom has kind of finished its theatrical run. Like, let the rest of the Snyderverse thing run its course. Don't distract from it. Let it make its money, and then they'll talk about what they're going to do.
I do enjoy Edge of Time laughing at comic book continuity. Yeah. There are so many examples of that. Dan says the important thing to remember for people who are upset that we will not see the DC EU anymore is that the Flash won't erase the DC EU or change it. He will just spark a new universe coexisting. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, kind of. But at the time, I don't think there would be any worry that it would erase it, because they wrote this movie and made it before James Gunn came on board and announced that he was doing a new 10-year plan. So, I mean, they were still in the process of they had fired Snyder, but they were still in the process of trying to continue his continuity at the time that this movie was made. So I don't think there was ever a question that the Flash movie was going to erase it.
Well, and when it comes to any reboot, reinterpretation, different direction, recasting, whatever, it's nothing previous is erased. It still exists. If you prefer Sean Connery as James Bond, then you can watch that. I prefer Timothy Dalton. I will watch that. And
that's a good point you brought that up, because those films use the same actors for Q, M, and Moneypenny through so many of the movies, and nobody blinked. So maybe they shouldn't blink nowadays when people do that. Because again, I'm an advocate for if they start a new which they will start new continuity, obviously with Bond. Why not bring back Ralph Fiennes and Naomi Watts and Ben Whishaw as M and Q and Moneypenny? Because obviously the fans will know it's a new continuity after No Time to Die. So, why not? But who knows? I'm not sure if they're as into that anymore. Kind of like that franchise used to cast the same actors in different roles in different movies and nobody minded. So, yeah. But that doesn't seem to happen with comic book movies because I think as the fans just kind of assume that everything has to be connected because they've been kind of brainwashed into thinking that after Marvel. Whereas, as we mentioned with Batman and Forever, they subtly referenced the Burton movies, but they didn't explicitly go out of their way to say this was canon, in the way that, say, On Her Majesty's Secret Service went out of its way to make it explicitly clear that he's the one he was with Honey Rider and Red Grant and Largo and those guys. So
yeah, agreed. And I have a theory on that one that I won't share now because it'll take too long. Tom Jr. Jackson says, I highly recommend, I'm assuming, watching the Suicide Squad with Gunn's commentary. That does sound intriguing. I like James Gunn, except for certain tweets. Dan says, I hope they won't do Crisis on Infinite Earths because they already did that on the CW, and I don't want to see the multiverse get erased again. I hope they will do DC's Dark Crisis. Again, Dan, you probably know more about this than I do. Captain Infinity says, a Zatanna movie? Yes. If we can get a lady magician in a leotard, I'm in. Dan says, in DC Dark Crisis, it's a new comic in Dark Crisis Darkseid. Darkseid or Darkseid?
Darkseid.
Darkseid is attacking the multiverse, and he is sending parademons to all the Earths in the multiverse in an attempt to conquer it. I hope they do that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a character in a continuity they're going to have to set up in advance as well.
Yes.
I think that might be a bit, kind of like in over on the Marvel side of things, when they introduced Iron Man, there was a big plot point in each of the 3 Iron Man movies that he's dealing with prototypes and having to actually, they tried to make the technology believable to fans so that way 10 years later when he got to nanotechnology, fans would be more accepting of it. Whereas if you just started out with the type of shit you see in Infinity War, I don't think they would have jived with it as much. So if you just start, it was one of my issues with the Justice League movie where all of a sudden there's this guy, what was the villain's name in that? Not Nicodemus. What's his name? Steppenwolf. Steppenwolf just kind of showing up with these mother boxes, like all this crap. I was like, what is this, and why do I need to care about it? So maybe I could,
Daniel is submitting. I worked in a karaoke bar once, and it was like I just keep getting tickets for more songs and more songs. Dan says, how awesome would it be if Darkseid sends parademons to the Joel Schumacher Batman Earth, for example? We see George Clooney and Chris O'Donnell look up at the boom tubes witnessing parademons coming out. That won't happen, unfortunately. I don't think. Well, first of all, I think that. Well, I don't know. I don't think Clooney's coming back, and unless you had Chris O'Donnell as Nightwing. Tom Jr. Jackson says, so the Superman 78 comic completely ignores Superman 3 and 4 and is like a direct sequel to Superman 1 and 2. I highly recommend that comic and the Batman 89 comic as well.
Isn't that weird how history repeats itself that way, that the 3rd and 4th movies of both franchises sucked so bad that it's like, in the comics, we're going to pretend they didn't happen and just come up with a direct sequel to the original continuity.
But that's something that is happening across, and I've had this conversation on Jill's channel in regards to different interpretations of something. When Eric Clapton had his early career, everyone loved him. He generated some fans, and then he generated new fans when he had an electronic era in the 80s. And then he did Eric Clapton Unplugged, and he basically derided his own career for the period when he was sort of experimenting with electronic music, or more synthesizers, more electric, and not electric guitars, but again, synthesizers. And it is like disregarding all the fans that you generated during those. So while it may not be I like Superman 3, I find Superman 4 to be entertaining on the same level as Batman 66. I know it wasn't popular, I know it wasn't successful, but to say we're just going to skip that. I like Alien 3. And when Neil Blomkamp was going to be making Alien, whatever it was going to be, and it was going to disregard Alien 3 and bring back Hicks and Newt, I think that's a neat idea. I'm going to see the movie, but I still like Alien 3 and that trilogy. I think that continuity is important to me. So you're omitting something because you don't like it, but you're also alienating people.
Right, but I'm saying that's
who
kind of
do like it.
That's what they did in the DC comics in both instances.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, again, that's just a general opinion that I have regarding any of the changes that happen.
That's kind of ironic. That's also, by the way, the same opinion that Leland Chee makes on as the keeper of the holocron at Star Wars, who unfortunately, clearly they don't listen to in the Disney era. He says that when they asked him, why didn't you just, once it's clear you had to get rid of the original continuities, because there were like so many different levels of canon, he says, why didn't you just get rid of it, wipe the slate clean, and start over with just the 6 movies and then the Clone Wars movie and TV show, because it would be so much easier. And he says, because everything in Star Wars is somebody's favorite. And that's why you put the Legends band on it. So it's not that it's not real. It's just that until a new director or writer comes on to retcon it, it could still be there. And which is their way of meaning that they're not going to, which is why as much as they don't listen to them, that's why you're not going to see the sequel trilogy get retconned as much as a lot of fans would probably prefer that to not have happened. It's not going to happen. So, yeah, because he takes that same opinion you have. You don't want to alienate fans of different things by doing that.
Well, I guess it's not that big of a theory, but it's just curious in terms of, I like this, I like this, I like this. And it has turned into, this is where things have gone off the rails and I can't abide these changes. Whereas I grew up in a situation where it was, what's your favorite James Bond? And the continuity of it never really played into it. It was just, which actor did you like playing James Bond? And that's the idea, as opposed to saying, no, this shouldn't have happened.
Well, that's kind of also, in a sense, what Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are doing with the Mandoverse, is they're trying to rationalize that asinine line from Episode 9 that JJ came up with, somehow Palpatine returned. And that's clearly what they've been hinting at in the Mandoverse to try and fix, because again, they're not going to retcon it as much as a lot of people probably prefer that, because again, everything in Star Wars is somebody's favorite. So we're going to have to rationalize it through the TV shows. And that's kind of an interesting, respectful position to take on it. Even though it would solve a myriad of problems if you just retconned it. But yes. So now Daniel follows up with, in every universe on their Earths have to fight parademons, and who knows what else, the denizens of Apocalypse. Yeah, but I think that would have to become a more animated thing, because the logistics of getting those actors to come back. In fact, you have to use de-aging technology. Val Kilmer, again, out of the question. Jack Nicholson retired like 13 years ago now, so he's not coming back. DeVito said as much as he would love reprising the Penguin, he'd only do it if it was Tim Burton approved and if Tim Burton were involved. So, and again, Uma Thurman and Arnold Schwarzenegger are the only two I think would probably be game. I mean, they look back fondly on Batman and Robin. I don't know if that means they would be game to come back and reprise those characters, though. So, again, if that was an animated thing, then totally. But otherwise, maybe it'd be cool, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Captain Infinity says so many continuities. But yeah. Phil's leaving. Gotta go. This is turning into the Daniel show, deuces. Well, hey, it's fun to hang out with the chat, and it's nice that Daniel is so passionate about it that he's got so much to say. I would feel remiss if I were to say, all right, we're out. But don't forget, we're not here all day. We will cap this out. But Dan, no, if I'm super happy that you're as passionate about DC. You're more passionate about DC than I am. I'm a big fan of the cinematic Batman universe. That's what this has been about. And so, but thanks, man. Thank you for being here. You go on to say, I listened to the documentary on YouTube, the one where Joel Schumacher apologizes for Batman and Robin. I heard that Joel went on the set of Face Off and talked to Nicolas Cage to be Dr. Crane as Scarecrow. Well, and then famously, Nick Cage was going to be Superman at one point, even with costume tests. And Jill says, good night, Phil. Finity says, then they should completely scratch. Well, and Captain Finity, you know better than anybody that there have been retcons going on since Empire Strikes Back. Dan says, I also hear that they were looking at Ewan McGregor as Dr. Jonathan Crane's Scarecrow, which would be a better Scarecrow. Ewan McGregor or Nicolas Cage? I'm good with Cillian Murphy.
Well, that depends. Yes, for Cillian Murphy for sure, but I guess that would be feasible that they would have been looking at Ewan McGregor back then, because he debuted back in those days. Like Trainspotting was what, 95, 96, around there. So he was around that time. So I just know that the studio executives wanted to retcon the Coolio character to be Scarecrow, and Joel Schumacher wanted Nick Cage to be Scarecrow. I have not heard about the Ewan McGregor thing, but my favorite version of Scarecrow is the only one we've seen in at least the cinema live action, which is Cillian Murphy. He killed it in the role. I think he's inherently creepy as Jonathan Crane, and I wish they had more scenes of just that, because they talk about how he's clearly a sadist and he gets off on this stuff, but you don't really get to see much of that because it's plot oriented. So I'll get into that for Batman Begins. I should save that for later. But yes. Yeah, Cillian Murphy is the correct answer to that question. But between the two of them, yeah, Ewan McGregor I think would do a better job probably, but for the tone that those movies were, I think Nick Cage would be better suited for that tonally.
Yes, and I think I read when doing research for Batman Forever that Ewan McGregor was in the running for Robin as well. Affinity says, literally anyone is better than Nicolas Cage. I respectfully disagree. I am a Nicolas Cage fan. Captain Affinity says, but Connery and Dalton are officially one continuity.
Dalton is much younger than Connery, and the fact, yes, you have the same actors playing M, Q, and that kind of thing, but back then people weren't sticklers about this. They understood it's different. They don't care. It's like continuity, schmontinuity. It's a Bond movie. Enjoy it, which is basically the same thing that George Miller said when people kept pestering him about, well, what's this Mad Max thing? Is it a sequel? Is it a prequel? Is it a reboot? Because, oh, it's Tom Hardy. Does that mean it's supposed to be younger version of Matt? And he's like, dude, it's a Mad Max movie. Just enjoy it. It is what it is. And that's the same thing with Bond. And I don't think I've heard wildly outrageous attempts to try and rationalize that all the Bond movies are part of the same continuity or a couple different ones. And I'm like, dude, just stop. It's like people didn't care about that crap back then, Not you, just stop, Captain Finney. I'm not talking about you, Captain Finney. I mean, like, other people who've done that have just gone on to these whole wild tangents about it. I'm like, the truth is back then people didn't care. And nowadays, because people do care, they're trying to rationalize that when back then it just didn't matter.
Well, and technically it's Connery, while being the original Bond, it's only when Lazenby pops in and you get the death of Tracy. That's the thing that ties them together. And
another thing, you've had 80 years of Batman, and Bruce Wayne is not aged at all. And if you thought about all of those stories, even though they're monthly comics, even if you thought of each story taking place on a different day of the week, it's like, no, you can't fit that much stuff and not age like at all in that time. And all of the craziness that happens in the record, that clearly they carry certain things over to be part of the continuity, but it's clearly not. It's like, whatever. It's like a Batman comic. Just enjoy it,
And then Captain Finity goes on to say, otherwise, why is Roger Moore leaving flowers at Lazenby's dead bird's grave?
Because the Tracy thing, when written in the books, because the book continuity is pretty much the same character, because obviously you don't have the problem of actors or recasting, because it's the same thing. And because it was a staple of the Bond character in the books that he was married and his wife was murdered, they decided to throw that in there. And that was also part of what admittedly is, I would argue, one of the biggest low points of the franchise, where Alfred Broccoli was so petty about the fact that Kevin McClory wouldn't let him use Blofeld again for The Spy Who Loved Me, that he decided, let's get around the legal issue by just filming a prologue where we'll pay off because they never really paid off the vengeance thing for Vengeance Against Blofeld, Diamonds Are Forever. So let's just do this really petty thing where we remind the audience about why Bond in particular doesn't like Blofeld, so we can take a helicopter and pick him up and drop him down a smoke. It was so bad and cheesy and beneath him, or it should have been beneath him to be that petty. But that's why they did that. I don't think they were trying to, because his films were so whimsical, with the exception of that pre-title scene for Your Eyes Only. The rest of that movie is very down to earth, literally and figuratively. Mm-hmm. That I don't think they were trying to, let's make the character serious. Like, no, they just wanted the story to be less whimsical after Moonraker. But no, that was just a petty thing they did. Yeah.
And then Daniel says, I hope they keep Michael Keaton in the new DCU. He does not have to be Batman. He could just be an older Bruce Wayne who has been displaced by the Speed Force from his world. Please don't let The Flash be Michael Keaton's last movie for Batman.
I mean, it's neat that they're finally bringing him back, but I like that idea though that he would be an older Bruce Wayne. That'd be neat if they were to have a separate continuity thing going on. I would be down with that. But the question is, are they going to do it? And again, like I said, the fact that he's still got it, playing Vulture in action scenes back in just 2016 when they filmed No Way Home, or I mean the Homecoming, then they could totally do it. Hell, screw him being older Batman. Just do another Batman movie with Michael Keaton as an Elseworlds thing. People would be down for that. But yeah, I agree. It's kind of like one of those cheap teases where, hey guys, we're bringing Michael Keaton back as Batman. Oh, but he's only in the movie for like 10 minutes. We're not going to use him again. So it's a trick, like that type of thing. So yeah, I would love it if he was in another movie with a bunch of screen time. But I don't know if it's going to happen. But that's not a bad idea though, Daniel.
And Captain Finity with a James Bond. The Broccolis actually care about continuity. Sure. Well,
that's a whole other can of worms that we addressed on the other show. But
yep.
Again,
Daniel's Hot Topics. Yeah, Martini's, Gadgets, and Guns. We reviewed every filmed James Bond except for James Bond Jr.
Yeah.
Daniel's Hot Topics it says, if The Flash is Michael Keaton's final movie as Batman, people are going to be so angry, me included. I don't doubt that you will be.
I don't think other people would be angry because I think realistically, even though, like I just said, I think he still got it, could still do it. I think average casual moviegoers are going to go, yeah, he's 72, so they get it why they're not going to do it again. But yeah, because again, I admit it might be neat to see it in the context of the Flash movie, but again, unlike, I go back to the No Way Home example, it made perfect sense to bring in the other Peter Parkers, but that worked in giving them more screen time because specifically they were Peter Parkers dealing with problems with their own universes. Here, Batman is a completely different. Batman from the Keaton verse is a completely different continuity, and like the Flash doesn't exist there. So I don't know what the rationale in the story is for even bringing him in, to the point that I don't think it's going to be a big thing in that movie. I mean, fans will think it's a big thing from a pop culture standpoint, but I don't think it's meant to signal that he's going to be in another Batman movie. It frankly feels like, oh, let's just do this because we can and it'll sell more tickets. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say because we haven't seen the movie yet. So
yeah,
we can only speculate.
Captain Finity says, keeping continuity across media is always a bad idea.
Yes, I agree with that. It gets too crazy. Case in point, all the multiple levels of canon for Star Wars before the Disney buyout.
Daniel says, yeah, what is it? The 4 movie of a franchise or TV show is crap, like Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, or Batman and Robin, or The Flash season 4, or Legends of Tomorrow season 4. They were all crap. Yeah. Well,
yeah, same with the recent Thor movie. It's like,
yeah,
they dumbed down the humor even more from Ragnarok, which is hard to believe, which completely undercuts Christian Bale's role as Gore the God Butcher, and what was arguably one of the best Thor stories in decades. And it could have been a really dramatic, excellent Thor film, and they just really shit the bed on that in favor of asinine juvenile. And they treated it like what you would expect from the 4th installment. And I think by then they just assumed that they've got you hooked so much that they're not going to care because it's branding at this point, so they'll just come and see it. Which is kind of like what the executives at Warner Brothers seem to think with Batman and Robin when they deliberately made it more toyetic.
Captain Finity says the new Star Wars books contradict the new movies just as much as the old ones.
I'm not up to speed on the new books. I know that there's the High Republic series set 400 years before the prequels, and I don't recall how the new books are supposedly contradicting the new movies. I mean, I know they've written, I think Timothy Zahn is writing his 3rd new Thrawn trilogy now.
Cool.
And that's excluding the Thrawn trilogy from the 90s. This is like 3 new trilogies he's done for the new era of Thrawn. So I don't know if that's what you're referring to. I'm not really. Probably, I can imagine that might contradict it in a sense to say that Thrawn in this new continuity was out there in the unknown regions at the same time the First Order and the Final Order, like all this crap going on. Maybe, but I don't know. I'm not up to speed on all the literary side of Star Wars. At least not in the new era.
Daniel says, the only thing I liked about Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, is that Superman moved the moon in front of the sun to stop Nuclear Man. People say that is stupid strong. He does not need Justice League. Well, there was no Justice League in Superman 4.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, heavens. Finity says, Dave Filoni is notorious for being a lazy retcon artist.
Not in Star Wars. I can't speak to the things he did before then, but he didn't retcon anything. I mean, yes, he introduced the world between worlds, which could technically be used to retcon anything you want, but they didn't use it as a retcon because they left Ahsoka's fate ambiguous at the end of Rebels Season 2. Like, Vader's walking out of the crumbling temple with his mask partly broken open, and you're not sure, like, did he kill her? Did she, like, what happened? And then they reveal in that world between worlds that she got pulled through the portal and saved. But other than that, I don't really see them like retconning anything, or that I don't see anything of everything Filoni has done as having retconned anything, unless you're talking about retconning the Legends continuity. But again, the Legends continuity isn't canon technically, so it's not really a retcon.
Probably someone should do a Star Wars show. I think there's one on the internet.
Maybe.
Dan says, also, I remember in those reviews on YouTube, they used the word toyetic. They wanted to sell toys when they should have focused on the story. And when you do that, the merchandise sells itself. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, you can say the same when the movie or show is not good, then you've made a whole bunch of toys that nobody's going to buy. And then Finity says, I heard the official canon is it was one continuity until Craig.
Again, they even up until then, they'd had multiple the same actors playing different roles in different movies. Like, he had Charles Gray playing Kato in You Only Live Twice, and then he shows up as Blofeld in Diamonds Are Forever. Joe Don Baker as Brad Whitaker in Living Daylights shows up as Jack Wade in Goldeneye and Tomorrow Never Dies. And then other bits like that. You had, of course, what's his name playing Morzani in From Russia with Love, and then going on to play General Gogol in the Roger Moore era. And so, and then again, the fact that Bond is clearly getting younger in certain continuities, whereas he's totally aging out and becoming older in others. So it's like,
and Captain Finney says it's up to the filmmakers to explain clearly what the continuity is.
Yeah, because if it's a story where you're trying to adhere to continuity, then the continuity will just be obvious if it's done well. Like the Daniel Craig era is a bit rocky in terms of how they're trying to tie it all in, but you could tell that the second one is a sequel, obviously, to Casino Royale because it picks up right after that. Skyfall, admittedly, if you didn't know any better, you would probably think that you wouldn't necessarily know where to place it instantly. Because Spectre, again, you don't really know about, because Spectre kind of picks up referring to the events of Skyfall, and then No Time to Die obviously picks up right after the end of Spectre. So in that regard, the continuity kind of presents itself. But I think, like what Scott said before, the Bond franchise, it was just, dude, it's a new Bond movie. Deal with it. It's like whatever. Like in the old days, kind of like, again, the George Miller Mad Max 4 thing.
Yeah, and I think it is something you're looking at. If you have such a long franchise, their primary concern is to make a good movie. They're not looking at let's make a good 6 movies or be beholden to the past. And Finity goes on to say, if they don't have answers, I ain't watching their movies. Your choice, I suppose. I don't think everything needs a slide rule and an abacus. Daniel's Hot Topic says, I remember back, and again, that's not a slight towards you and your preferences towards continuity, Captain. It's just something that doesn't bother me. It sounds very Princess and the Pea to me. Daniel's Hot Topic says, I remember back in the 90s, it was 92. I was 5 at the time. I saw Batman Returns on the shelf, so I asked my mom to buy it for me, but she said no. So I peeled the plastic off the tape and popped it into one of the VCRs, and that is how I watched it. Oh, you bootlegged your own. It's not stealing. It was borrowing. That's interesting. That was a specific thing that came up on an episode of Quantum Leap that Jill and I watched last Thursday. Finity says, no, the meeting of Poe and Rey in the books is completely contradicts the movie.
That's right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because that's right. Because at the In the movie, he doesn't meet her till the end of The Last Jedi, and I think he meets her in the book The Force Awakens. I did not read the novelization of The Force Awakens. And that's another example of why Disney isn't paying attention to their own. Like, I think that's why they had that big spread where they announced, oh, we're going to do the High Republic series, and they showcased how it's all written in advance, and they're actually paying attention to continuity this time for that series. So they wouldn't have those issues. But yeah, it is absurd that they had that issue with yeah, that's what you're referring to. Yeah, the novel. Like, the thing about the novelizations also is that they add things that weren't there. Like, for instance, in Phantom Menace, they added the bit that Darth Maul sensed something about Anakin as well, and he told Palpatine about it when he got back to Coruscant. And that's why Palpatine is kind of paying attention to Anakin, and he gave Maul the instruction, well, you kill the Jedi, but keep the kid. But that's not in the movie. Yeah, so it's like, it's expanded, but it doesn't really count, because how many people, like, a fraction of a percent of the people who go see the movie are going to read the book, the novelization, you know?
Well, and part of the reason why the extended universe, the novels and everything like that came to popularity in the 90s anyway was because there was no cinematic Star Wars to dig into.
Right.
So that's why the books occurred. And now, like, novelizations are novelizations. It's something to be discussed on a Star Wars discussion, I suppose. Captain Finity says, if actors are contingent on continuity, then Tarantino's shared universe is definitely a joke.
Yeah, because the Tarantino shared universe, you're right. It is very bizarre how they do that, because they have the same actors playing all sorts of different characters, but then they make deliberate references to certain family members, and it's like, it doesn't really work. It's like you have to kind of turn your brain off in some instances and pay attention to others. So yeah, it doesn't really, and plus it doesn't really matter if they're connected or not, because it's not like you ever have any blatant crossover. Like, you don't have an actual character from one movie showing up as another sort of thing, at least not as often, like maybe once, but it's not, it's kind of semantics for me that when they say it's a shared universe, it's like, is it really?
I think it is. Captain Finity says it should bother the filmmakers. I think that they are tasked with the project at hand. And if they can incorporate things to maintain a continuity, if it is required for the story that they're telling, then it should. If it's just another story in the episodic nature of movies that are today in any franchise, then, or if it's an Elseworlds, if it's a parallel universe. And Jill says, but you're okay if the different movies are in parallel universes. And then, like the parallel universes in Pulp Fiction. Again, I think that Tarantino makes a movie and then he is happy with it. He's proud of it. He puts it on the shelf. He does put Easter eggs in there for people who have been following his career, but and he's spoken of it. Again, we've gone.
Another way you could rationalize same actors playing different roles is you could just say they're doppelgangers. That's another way around it. But, if that's what you want to do to make sense of it, but I've never really been bothered by it that much either. Unless it's a situation where they're going out of your way to be very in your face about continuity, like Star Wars, Episode 7, Episode 8. It's like, well, that's an issue. But if they're not, and there's just a movie, then it's like, okay, it's a movie, enjoy it, or not. It's like the Solo movie. I mean, it was better than I thought it was going to be, but there are other things I don't like about it, but I don't really care. It's like, I didn't thrill to read all of the original books about Han Solo when they were out. It's like, I liked Harrison Ford in the role, great. I didn't feel the need to go read all that extra stuff. And even though I'm familiar with a lot of it, I didn't get offended by the changes they made in the Solo movie, because I don't have to care about it. Like, I can either regard it as part of my headcanon or not. It's like, whatever,
I don't even think it has to be a headcanon issue. I think it's a matter of, I will take a piece of art and I will appreciate it if I see a piece of art, and I don't appreciate it, then I will disregard it. It doesn't necessarily have to color within the lines, if you will. Dan says, The Flash will finally settle the debate if Michael Keaton's Batman universe is the same as the Clooneyverse.
I wasn't aware there was a debate. I mean, other than when DC Comics did Batman 89, which was more of a nod to the fans, because everybody knew that they had different plans for Batman Forever when Tim Burton was still in the director's chair. And so they decided, well, let's just do that as a comic. But before then, like Scott mentioned, they did have allusions to that. I think part of that was the reason Schumacher wasn't as blatant about it is because he was sort of paying respect to Tim, because he knew that Tim didn't like the direction they were going. I mean, he was still on board as producer for Forever, because I think he would get credit anyway, because they still used some of his original script and kind of cannibalized it from there to turn it into something different. But I mean, in a sense, it didn't really matter that much, I guess, because you think about it, it's like Gotham itself even changes in appearance a lot between Batman 89 and Batman Returns. You know, it's like
Yeah.
it doesn't look the same. They had a whole new production designer and stuff, and so is it simply a different part of the city? Probably, or is it the same city? Maybe not. It's so, it's kind of sort of like what happened in the Dark Knight trilogy. It's like the biggest continuity issue is when they suddenly swapped Chicago for Pittsburgh and New York City in Dark Knight Rises. And it's like, yeah, you can't really make the argument that because only 8 years have passed that the entire city has been rebuilt and the entire land is different, But
Yeah.
but they did it and they got away with it. So
Captain Infinity says, but yes, I love the idea that Spider-Man acknowledged the 3 Spideys. Again, multiverse. And that's becoming a tired trope in not so very long. Dan says, only 5 more months to go till the Flash. Yes, I suppose. Yes. And again, I will check it out when it arrives. And did you see the concept art that WBDC released? It shows both Flashes fighting in the Dark Flash throughout the multiverse. We see Christopher Reeve Superman, Terrence Stamp Zod, George Reeve Superman. I haven't seen that. I have not seen that. Dan says, in the multiverse, it's all there. And yeah, and multiverses, I have no qualms with it, but if multiverses start showing up everywhere, I'm just going to start saying, then nothing matters. And that's kind of frustrating. Some say they spotted Christian Bale Batman. Well, that's a possibility. Finity says, 2 people saying Solo or Bond is an issue for me is Tim Roth playing 2 ostensibly unrelated people in Los Angeles. I see them as 2 different movies. I enjoy the connective tissue that exists, but it doesn't bother me in the slightest that different actors play different characters in different movies. It's acting. Brilliant. Dan says, oh, by the way, remember in like March or April of 2021, before they started filming the Flash movie, there were talks that maybe Michael Keaton won't be Batman and Christian Bale may be Batman for the Flash. I do recall that.
you see, that's kind of why I think this is kind of the Batman stuff is getting overblown in this movie, because those are 2 completely different versions of Batman.
Yeah.
And to say that you've already written a script and you're ready to go and you're already thinking about changing it wishy-washy between 2, that to me sounds like it's just going to be there for a cool cameo just because. Because obviously bringing in the Christian Bale Batman in that universe, well, we know where, depending on what point in time in that universe he is plucked into the Flash movie, like is it at post Dark Knight Rises where he's living in Italy or whatever with Catwoman? Is it pre Dark Knight Rises, post Dark Knight where he's injured at home rehabilitating? Is it the 6 months between Begins and Dark Knight where he's still Batman in his prime? It's like, whereas Keaton's Batman is like, okay, he's older, so is it going to be like a Batman Beyond version, or are they going to use de-aging technology? So the fact that they're being wishy-washy between which one they're going to cast that late in the game, to me, suggests that they're doing it as a gimmick, not as a major inherent story reason for doing it.
Well, and I hate to do a judge's ruling. We are 2 minutes away from the 2.5 hour mark, and I think we have delved as deeply as we possibly can into multiverses, continuities.
I will say this about multiverses. I think I agree with people when they say everything everywhere all at once is probably the best use of a multiverse concept in a movie, because it actually gets it across. It tells a compelling family drama and uses the multiverse to convey the unspoken issues and emotions and frustrations between this couple and this family, and it does it very well. And I would advise people go see that just to get a sense of what I'm talking about, as opposed to the frankly not very creative version of the multiverse, which is basically these comic book movies are using them as an excuse to justify how do we rationalize these different continuities from the different actors playing it, rather than actually using it for anything compelling. I guess that's my piece on it. Except maybe No Way Home would be in a second. They actually use that pretty decently, but that's about it. But that's neither here nor there. But you're right. This has gone on a pretty long time, and people are like, "Hey, we thought this was a Mask of the Phantasm show." Well, it was.
Yeah, I would, and that's, I wanted to talk about this movie because it does have a Mask of the Phantasm has a special place in my heart, just in regards to Kevin Conroy, Mark Hamill, Bruce Timm, Andrea Romano, everyone who is in it, and how it spills over to the Batman animated series and that continuity, the Timmverse, if you will. But at least that was all in one continuity. Captain Infinity, if you'd like to go on in terms of having a conversation in regards to continuity and multiple continuities, absolutely. And Daniel's hot topics, we could talk about the possibilities of a film that is not yet released until the cows come home. We are going to find out in 5 months, as you mentioned, and I'm hoping that it will blow the socks off of me and everyone else who is a fan. I hope it's not a disappointment. But in terms of the speculation and what could have been, I love going behind the scenes. But aside from that, what we have is what we have, and what was released, and what is on my shelf. So, with that being said, and I apologize if I am dismissing, I did want to thank everyone in the chat, from Daniel's Hot Topics, Black Phillip Alvarez, Anti-Derivative Jill, Captain Infinity, Edge of Time, Lemon Pie. Did I say LDG? I probably did, but he is the man so nice, we name him twice. There's a lot I got to scroll up through it. Tom Jr. Jackson, of course, friend of the show. So fantastic to have you here. I want to talk to you about the 89 and 78 comic book continuations that you were discussing. Edge of Time, thank you so much for being here. Cinema Gulp, Ben, always a pleasure. We got to get you on for one of these Batman talks. Matt G, thank you for being here very much. And Diggs BTW7, thank you for being here. And I hope you return. Don't forget to like and subscribe, share with your friends, tell everybody about it. We do have, if you'd like to support the channel, there are links in the below, and you can do that. Kat, where can people find you on the internet?
YouTube, Twitter, Instagram at Slice and Ide. You can find me here every Wednesday night with Scotty doing a show. But right now it's Capes, Cowls, and Crusaders. We also have all the Martinis, Gadgets, and Guns, and the Bullets, Blades, and Babes. You can also find me every second and fourth Sunday of the month streaming live on YouTube and the Star Wars Celebration Anaheim YouTube, or no, Celebration Europe, or whatever it's called. They changed the name based on where the city is that it's being held. Facebook channel. It's easier just to go to the Virtual Cantina Network YouTube channel every second and fourth Sunday of the month at 8 a.m. Pacific for the Unifying Force, a Star Wars talk show dealing with Star Wars philosophy, which I co-host with friends Dave from North Carolina and Gio from London.
Fantastic. And thank you for being here to talk about these things. My God, I can't believe we're going through. This is our third franchise. It's fantastic hanging out with you. I am Scotty R37. I am here mostly on the Phantasmagorium show and a lot on Anti-Derivative Jill's channel. I've been doing the animated series on Star Trek, the animated series on Pop Culture Curator's channel, and go check that out. Pop Culture Curator has been reviewing. He's started up a horror sci-fi show, and he's been talking about Gilligan's Island as well. I'm on Jill's channel talking about the original series. Sorry?
That's great.
And then we've been talking about Quantum Leap as well on the Phantasmagorium show. And I hang out with her and her motley crew on Fridays when she does her Palomic Tea Time. Hanging out all over the place. Sometimes pop in on Captain Infinity's channel. He has a channel. Of course, LDG Free the Net does as well. Daniel's Hot Topics. Everybody who you can find in the chat, I would recommend putting them into the search bar. And if you have a channel, I know Black Phillip Alvarez is taking a hiatus from his channel, but he does have one. Tom Jr. Jackson has his something chat show where he's been praising and reviewing his favorite movies, new and old. But yeah, thank you guys for being here very much.
A friendly reminder, next week we are going to be covering the animated Hush film from 2019. So watch the movie, read the comic, and maybe read the Heart of Hush comic as well if you want. It'll be a fun Hush discussion next Wednesday.
Absolutely. And thank you very much. Thanks to Jill for posting the links in the chat. And I will, Kat, I never said thank you.
You just said it several times, but you'll never have to say it again.